Welcome back to the Imperial 80s. I'm Tume. How are you doing?
I'm all right. It's Monday. It's December. We doing okay. How you doing, bro?
Yeah, I've had better days, weeks, months, years.
Yeah.
I'm doing all right. But good to be with you. Excited to finally do Die Hard, which is one of the ones that we knew we would have to do from the beginning, and probably
Mhm.
we're excited to.
Mhm.
Um, and yeah, I mean, this is the thing too, is that it is also a movie that you know I also enjoy watching.
Oh yeah.
Can't kind
Yeah.
of help myself. But yeah, there's it's obviously really messed up in a lot of ways, and so we'll talk about that. Before we do that, I just want to take a minute and just acknowledge and laugh a little bit that I've mentioned this before on millennials, but like the Manhattan Institute has been like trolling us and our guests for about a year. Like they have this guy they probably pay $15 an hour to make like YouTube like clips, of from our shows to um I think most of it is done using AI, like both in terms of the clipping and the article writing that happens as a result of this.
Mhm.
Um I mean, it's flattering in some respect because I guess it means that they think that whatever we do means enough that they need to try to like counter it. It's also annoying because it leads to these sort of harassment campaigns of our guests. But anyway, I just it's noteworthy, I think, that last week was our 20th episode. So we've been doing this for a while. We've done a lot of movies that are near and dear to a lot of people's hearts. And that Plane, Trains, and Automobiles was the one that finally got uh, an attack campaign, going for Mtume. So,
Yeah,
um,
that was the last straw, was planes, trains, and automobiles. It set off the right wing bots and trolls and people. That was a bridge too far. I think Rambo, Lethal Weapon, Poltergeist, Empire of the Sun. I mean, you name it. Even Indiana Jones. I mean,
I
these
know
things
we talked about how
were
Indiana Jones is
fine.
a pedophile, and George Lucas
Right.
made him that
Yeah,
way, and they're like,
yeah,
"Yeah, that's
exactly.
all
Yes,
right." Like,
exactly. We talked about the anti-communism of Red Dawn. John Milius is one of their like patron saints. And we went in on Milius, but it was planes, trains, and automobiles that was the thing that set them off. Yeah, it's you're never really gonna know, huh? You're never really gonna know what it's going to be. But you could not have paid me $1 billion. Come on. No, no. I would never have guessed that one.
yeah, I'll never know. I mean, maybe it was just a slow week at the Manhattan Institute, but maybe
Well,
there is something very particular about John Hughes and
well,
our,
what
bu-
they
you
took
know,
exception to, though, what they took exception to, which I found interesting, was the the ideas that this was some kind of the planes and automobiles, the whole idea of the bourgeois working person, and this film being a kind of conduit for their own, emotional petting. And they were just like, no, this is absolutely just terrible. How are you making these kinds of ideas going about, So,
which is funny because in certain ways, I would say, like, I think it's revealing a little bit of the class politics of the Manhattan
yeah,
Institute too, right? Because like if they were actually in touch with like working class, conservative rural Americans, right?
that's a good point.
Um, then they would be like, yeah, these guys have a point. This movie is pretty fucked up in its portrayal of like working class white folks. But no, they're like really mad that we made
They're
that
very mad.
critique.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, and it's weird. It's like they even when reading, and granted, I do agree, much of these things felt like they were made with like a bot generated argument thing. Like, make this argument for this argument. When you read it, it just doesn't have any like real. It doesn't feel like a real person. It feels like an aggregate. But even when they're like editing or saying what they like from the aggregate, what is revealed is their class politics, and that they do see themselves as a kind of ushering of like good morals, even for the, the working class, which is hilarious because they're basically just proving us right, even in their, dismissal of our critique of the film, which is I just find really funny. But
It's wild because it's what do you care? I mean, that's the thing that I'm just like I feel like there's a lot of analysis that we've done on this show but I mean, I think that's the thing is I think that is probably their first time like really watching it and
yeah,
digging into it.
well, they'll love
I
this.
even went back to the episode with the Shihais because they love to go after Lara long time, but like um they didn't do anything when we did what's it, the Chuck Norris, why am I blanking? Delta Force,
Yeah,
like they didn't even, so
no,
anyway,
no,
weirdos.
yeah.
Um, all right, now on to the actual topic at hand, which is Die Hard. So, yeah, early memories of watching Die Hard.
I mean, I think it's probable to say I'd have to check with my dad that I've been watching Die Hard since it came out. I didn't see it in the theater. Like I've said before on the show that my parents didn't really have a watching filter. And if they did have that like selective film that they wouldn't want me to see, I could find my way to it pretty easily. Um, and this is a movie that my father, I think to this day, is still obsessed with. Like it's like a ritual film in my house. Like Die Hard was one of those movies that seasonally or even just like, hey, it's been 3 months. Die Hard has not been on. Put Die Hard on, right? It just had this weight. Um, I do wonder, and we'll talk about it. I do think because of the kind of like action, of course, the kind of maleness that is really exuded in the film at a really high, nasty level. But I also do wonder if like three black characters in really significant sidekick roles, even if two of them only have so many lines, but they have like key like functionalities, right? I wonder if that played a role in the kind of like acceptance in my home. Um, but yeah, I mean, I watched it a lot. I watched it as a teenager. It was like a ritual to watch Die Hard over and over again. Once I got a bit older, I think it was a film I still would watch like casually and enjoy on its like action merits. And then I didn't watch it for a while. And then when I came back to it, this is we'll talk about this, I'm pretty sure, a lot. When I came back to it as like, oh, let me go watch this action movie that I knew was fun. I had already started reading about a lot of the anti-colonial movements, the anti-imperialist struggles, and the European end. I started reading about a lot of that stuff already. And I got fascinated that the film would mention Arafat in passing, kind of suggest that they were part of these, probably, well, the book, we'll talk about the book that it comes from also, Red Army Faction and things like that. Groups that I had like been looking at, but then suggest that these people had no real interest in it. They were using him as a cover. So I got really was like, I was taken aback by it, right? And I think when I started thinking about the 80s as a kind of project of a certain mentality when it came to ideology and like what they believed in, like ideological struggles and this kind of cynicism that I think that they wanted to kind of present um globally, it then became a more pernicious picture. Use pernicious, drink um the pernicious drink game. It became a really weird picture. And then the other thing that I will also say, and we'll talk about this, is that I did also, and while like if I watch it, and I do probably watch it every couple of years, the violence of it is just so overwhelming. And I do think by like my mid 30s, when I would like look at it, I would just be like, this movie is like a bit overwhelming when it comes to like how violent it is. I mean, when I watched it, this is a movie like I didn't need to watch. Like I watched it, I didn't need to watch like during the week and watch again. I've seen it so many times, so I rewatched it last night, and there's like a lot of it, but there's like three sequences of the movie where the kind of energy level it has like no it's just affinity of like hard high violence. It has become very overwhelming. So that's kind of where I've sat with it. And I do think though it is like politically a really interesting movie about the kind of political unconscious of the United States couple years before Soviet Union, dissolves, before we get to the end of history. Because, like, I'm not gonna say it's prescient. I'm not gonna say that, but I think it previews what would to come in the American mentality towards the globe. I think kind of where we were trending, and then when certain things happen, I think Die Hard kind of becomes attached to like the predominant mentality that would exist kind of going forward. That's a long answer towards that.
No, I appreciate that a lot. Um, Nora, good to see you. Shout out to Nora and Electronic Intifada. Yeah, I also forgot to do this at the beginning. So do the things like share, subscribe, make sure more people can see this, join in the conversation. Support the Patreon if you want access to bonus episodes and to support the work. So yeah, I mean, for me, I also saw this fairly young, which is interesting because like I have said, I did have more filtering in my family, and so I don't remember exactly, and I'm not sure. My father is still watches TV like this, so I don't know whether I would have seen all of it, right? Because my father, what he would do is my father's a massive sports watcher, right? And we lived way out in the country, so he bought one of those big satellite dishes because we couldn't get cable where we were at. And so in the early days of satellite, like this is an 80s conversation here. In the early days, like 80s, late 80s, early 90s, like you had this massive dish. It's not like Dish Network or these little tiny, like you had this big dish and it had to rotate. And so it had this I don't even know what you call it, receiver, I guess, where you typed in the satellite and it was literally like G617, right? Which was like you're pointing at satellite G6 channel 17, right? And so and then you would watch the satellite turn outside on this like rotor to like go get the signal. Like it was crazy. And in the very early days, you could get everything everything in the world. Like, I'm not saying everything because there's probably local channels that you couldn't, but like, you could go to any country, and it was all there and it was all at that point unencrypted. And so you didn't have to subscribe to anything in the very beginning of it. It was just, I mean, the thing cost a significant amount of money. My parents were both teachers, so I don't actually know how they afforded it, but they bought it. But they I guess it was my father's dedication to sports and like a long-term investment. So he would be going around watching different sporting events, but then every once in a while he would check like okay, the games are boring right now or it's halftime. Like what's going on? And so it would have been in one of those blips that I first like got a glimpse of Die Hard. And my dad would do his typical thing of like, oh yeah, it's a dumb action movie, but then he'd be like into it, and you could tell that, he liked it. And so I remember watching it in those like kind of, circumstances, like bits of it, not all of it at once. And then when I was a little bit older, that's when I would have like had more mobility to go over to my friends' houses more and stuff like that and would have seen it because my friend Andy in particular had HBO, and so we would always watch stuff on there. But And also the funny thing about the unencrypted satellite is that they figured that out pretty quickly, and then you had to buy another box and pay for subscriptions, right? But there was this little window. It's kind of like Napster for the 80s, right? When you could just get everything. Um, so yeah, I mean, impressions as a young person was just that it was, yeah, for action movies, like it was great. What's not to like about it? I do think you're muted, by the way, but I do think that Bruce Willis was a step above other action figures of the 80s in terms of his acting, actually, right? Like he's
Yeah.
not the like Sylvester Stallone Sylvester Stallone, which we've talked about, has some kind of limited acting chops, right? But like very, very specific range. Um, he's not Arnold, who's just one-liners and rah, 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 he actually can act a little bit and deliver lines and doesn't come out, which I know you'll talk about, I'm sure, but like he was not the first, second, or third choice for this movie.
I don't think he was a fifth. I think he was
Yeah,
I think it was they went through the whole cupboard
yeah,
and then went to the
and
store and found Bruce Willis.
yeah, and he was like a TV, like he was a TV
Moonlighting.
actor primarily, yeah, and not an action one. And yeah, so I liked it. I mean, I think as far as when I started becoming more critical on it, um, I mean, I was always a little bit. I always had the critique or the critical lens on action movies in general, coming from my
Mhm.
father mainly. Is like he really did understand that they were like kind of promoting violence and policing and military, and like even if he wasn't you know constantly, he wasn't like you know debunking all of this and providing me with counter propaganda for all of it, but he would just sort of say like that's like I think on some level to him is like that's a lower class of cinema, is sort of my father to some extent, but it's also he did understand that it was promoting things that were bad, right? And I think that
Yeah.
came from him being opposed to the Vietnam War and like all of his kind of political trajectory out of that. Um, and I think particularly when I started paying more attention to propaganda, like it's like a template, right? Or it's like something so, I mean, a lot of what we'll say in terms of the analysis of this as propaganda is like so obvious and, clear, and tropes that we see through various forms of propaganda over and over again. So, that part of the analysis of this film is actually, I think, the easy part of it. And so, yeah, I mean, from that lens as well. But I also have admitted many times that there's a lot of propaganda that I really enjoy watching, despite how I shouldn't. It's
Mhm.
just it's also that there aren't any movies made in the United States anymore, or TV shows in the United States anymore, really, that are not propagandistic in some way, it feels like. But yeah.
Yeah, when we get to Beverly Hills Cop, we'll get into my complicated film because I enjoy the shit out of that movie, and I said that is I do think Beverly Hills Cop is the most effective piece of propaganda ever made. It's just so well oiled to get you to totally root for a cop in that kind of way. But yeah, I mean, so Die Hard, the other thing that began to intrigue me was when I began to look at the source material of Die Hard. That ended up being a real fascinating rabbit hole that I took a couple of years ago. Um, and so we'll talk a little bit about its making and things like that because it's actually kind of fascinating because there's the source material, and then there's also kind of like what Jay was mentioning. I think the qualitative shift of action stars because a film that we talked about already, 87, is one I think like the first stage in the shift. That's Lethal Weapon, right? And then Die Hard becomes like the second kind of step towards this shift. And these shifts are like lasting to even today. I think there's shifts that have become mainstays, and we'll talk about that. So the screenwriter, and I'll go to him, but then I'll go to the source material in a second, is a guy named Jeb Stewart, right? I think he's still alive. He was at the time hadn't really done anything. He had sold a script. He was struggling, so forth and so on. He was like looking for a project, and his agent convinced him to work on the adaptation of a novel that is called Nothing Lasts Forever. So this novel was written in 79 by a guy named Roderick Thorpe. Thorpe, if I'm remembering correctly, he was was he a detective? Was he a retired detective? He was retired something in law enforcement, right? And he wrote these novels. He wrote these kind of, the novels that you get at the store, you buy for $1, these kind of pulpy novels. And he wrote one called The Detective, which became a film with Frank Sinatra. And this becomes a hilarious story. And Sinatra's going to come back in this story in a funny way when the movie gets made. It's actually really hilarious. The Detective. I've never actually seen this film. Yeah, it's a film starring Sinatra as an NYPD detective named Joe Leland, right? And the book Nothing Lasts Forever was written by Thorpe in thinking that it could also be one day made into a movie starring Sinatra. And we'll get to that in a moment, right? So the Nothing Lasts Forever plot is very similar to Die Hard, but it's also different, I think, in really significant ways. The original plot is about an NYPD detective named Joe Leland he's visiting the office headquarters of an oil corporation in LA on Christmas Eve. The person he's going to visit is not his wife in the movie, it's his daughter, right? Stephanie Leland Gennaro, which they do keep in it, right? Upon arriving to it, the building is taken over by the German Autumn. They're an era terrorist group that they kind of liken. Well, I don't know if I can't remember. They might even actually specifically say Red Army faction actually in the book. I'm not exactly sure. I've looked through the book, but they definitely look at actual history, right? But in the book, the Joe character, who later becomes John McClane, is actually a counter-terrorism familiar person, right? He knew him through like a counter-terrorist conference, right? He has like all this information on his dossier about him. So he basically like is in the building and they take it over. The big other difference though is the Gruber character, and he's called Anton in the book, but he'll be Hans later, we know, played by Alan Rickman in the film, is that they are looking to expropriate funds, but they're not looking to expropriate funds for their personal gain. They're actually anti-imperialist revolutionaries. Now, I'm not saying this book is like really painting them credit. It sounds, and from what I've read of it in bits and pieces, a very reactionary book in its own right. Just like this movie's a very reactionary, different way. And also they, like I have it written here, they proceed to steal documents that will publicly expose Claxon, that is the corporation's dealings with Chile junta. And this has to do directly with like Pinochet and all of that, right? About supporting dictatorial governments. So Nothing Lasts Forever is a kind of right-wing pulp novel, right? Talking about the need to kind of smash the anti-imperialist struggle as this kind of crazy thing. Another big difference, and we'll talk about, is the Gruber character in the book. I don't know if it's all of them, but the majority of his followers are women in it. So he has this band of like armed women, and they kind of go into it. It's very like salacious in that kind of way. And the other big difference is the daughter in the book is a kind of bit of a cokehead, right? She has a relationship with Harry Ellis, who is a character in the film. We all remember Ellis, I think if you've seen the film. Oh man, we're gonna talk about Ellis, man. Poor Ellis. Not really. Right. But you have Ellis, but she's in a relationship with him. So they shift the book in this way. So kind of why the book shifts. I mean, some of it I'll tell you explicitly why it happens, but then there's also, I think, politically you have to think about it because that book was released in 79, and you're still kind of in the presence of that situation that was happening in Western Europe. And we've talked about this when we talked about Nighthawks, right? The this kind of fear mongering that what's happening in Europe could one day happen here, and the Euro terrorists, and I put those in quotations, will come here and do the same thing. That kind of left by that time, right? That's not as much in the kind of popular imagination in the American moment. I remember I asked my dad about this, and he was like, yeah, I remember that was a thing of like, the 70s and the 80s. I don't really remember it being a thing by that time, right? So the writing of the when they go to work on the screenplay, one of the things that was kind of said was like, yeah, like keep the Christmas thing. Christmas in LA, they like that backdrop. Keep it in one building. We're into that idea. Um, and he's also named John Ford in one of the scripts, and they were like, "Well, you can't name him John Ford because John Ford, the really famous filmmaker, and they don't think it was respectful." So they go with McClane, and we'll talk about this. I'm sure you will talk about this because they said because of like Scottish working classness and this idea that they wanted to make McClane into a kind of working class hero. And I think this is really important when we think about John McClane as now a figure. He's a pop culture figure as a kind of symbolizing of working class enforcement and male virility and, upholding the law and Americanness. Right. So they do this. Another big thing, and they bring in John McTiernan, and we talk about McTiernan because he was the director of Predator. This is the film he does after Predator. I believe it's his third film overall, if I'm correctly. And of course, the success of Predator helps him get this. McTiernan was like, look, I'm into this, right? But what I would like you to do is like give it a little bit of funny. He basically requests the kind of like jovial nature, right? Let's not make it too serious, so forth and so on. Let's like give it a little bit of this. And then I forget which one of the film's producers, they said they're fine with like the terrorists, right? But they want to kind of get rid of the whole political edge. And they said they felt it would make a more fun film. Um, I'm sure that's part of their thinking, but is a part of me that thinks that this, and I'll talk more about this later, that this kind of comes from a certain kind of unconscious when they think about these kinds of acts, that they don't think that they're inherently they could be ever inherently principled, even if I'm not advocating for the act as much as I'm saying they couldn't come from an ideological place outside of like, I just want to get my money, get rich. And what does he say? What does Hans say? We'll be on a beach getting 20%, right? That's their mentality, that these people just want to get rich, which I think becomes a thing that people always say about, groups and things like that. And trying to think if there's if you have anything. Oh, the other thing to mention is that it also is under the wing of Joel Silver and Lawrence Gordon, who had the huge success of Lethal Weapon the year before, which was also a film that was not supposed to be as big. So then Die Hard becomes their next thing. And then a funny thing, and I call it an industrial complex, because if you watch Lethal Weapon, Die Hard, and another movie that we have to do, Action Jackson, if you watch the three of them, and they're made in like, I think it's 87. No, Action Jackson's the same year as Die Hard. I'm sorry. You'll find a cast of characters that are, some of them that are in all three films, some of them that are in two of the three. It's really funny. There's like a little musical chairs of like character actors who are in the films. It's really, really hilarious. But this is part of their new action industrial complex. So if you haven't watched our Lethal Weapon episode and you want to know more about Joel Silver, Lawrence Gordon, definitely like check that out, because this is like the next shift for them, right? This is like their next big project. It has more money, because of the success of Lethal Weapon, though this film was not something that they thought would be a huge success. And we can talk about that as well. I don't know if you have some things, Jay. I probably have some more. I want to look at my notes, but Jay, you can jump in if there's anything you want to add in this kind of pre section.
Just quickly, like, so this is Roderick Thorpe. He looks quite a bit like Lennon, to be honest with you. There's like a striking Lennon in a jean jacket. But he was, as you said, he was a detective, but it was not a police detective. So his
Private
father
detective.
owned his father owned a detective agency, and then he taught literature and lectured on creative writing at, in New Jersey and California, and it's just his Wikipedia page. But anyway, yeah, that's interesting. It is interesting too what you said about the that the book, has more, like, that the politics are there, even if they're demonized, right? That the politics are a little bit more, prevalent within the book. Whereas, yeah, I mean, the film, I mean, I know we'll talk about this as we get into it, but it's quite obvious that there's a real attempt, and it goes. I think the kind of Nighthawks to this film are really kind of interesting to look at in a lot of ways, because the Nighthawks has kind of the seeds of this film in terms of, seeing the revolutionaries as like unprincipled, and as, sort of being about, like, saying they're about prisoner swaps and liberation and all of this other stuff, but not really, being clear that they aren't really. Obviously here they're quite clear that that's a veneer, right? That like, and it's, yeah, we'll talk about that a little bit as we get into the movie. The only other thing that I, wanted you to talk about a little bit too is ending up with Bruce Willis, because of all
Right.
of the other people that were asked. And um I also found it a little bit interesting, sort of the, and I don't know if you saw this or dug into it at all, the sort of reasons that were given as why, right? Because also it would seem like, obviously in hindsight, we look at it and say, this is another one of those vehicles, right? In the same way that, Rambo or Rocky or, well, those are good examples, right? It's like it makes this actor and gives them a franchise and a career, as well as like an ability to have, all kinds of, spin-offs and merch or whatever else, although the actor may or may not benefit from that stuff that much personally, but certainly it makes them famous on a certain level, which, like, Bruce Willis before this film is basically nobody. I mean, like, he is an actor, he does work, right? He would have had a career, but the Bruce Willis as we think about him now, as like an icon, it would not be who he is without this film, quite clearly, I think. So obviously, like, that vehicle was open to the taking for a lot of other people that said no to this.
Yeah. So when the film was written, the first hurdle they had to go over was the film was actually contractually obligated to Frank Sinatra because of the detective. Um, the book was written, he owned the rights to the character. It was like on him. But when the film was about to be made, Sinatra was 70. So they go to Frank, and Frank's like, bruh, come on. Like, it was an easy conversation to be like, this is not going to happen. So then they move Sinatra out, and they go through all of them. They go to all of them. I mean, from Stallone to like Richard Gere, Schwarzenegger. They went through a tons of people. They asked Mel Gibson. I don't have the reasons why a lot of them turned it down. I think part of it was even though Lethal Weapon was successful, there was still this kind of not quite sure if these films could really be something that was going to go mega. So I think even though they would do some of these films, I think there would be additional factors why they would and would not choose to do them, right? And it would be very Arnold. Oh no, Arnold turned it down because they said he was trying to not do as many action movies. So I think he opted to do Twins, which for his own right ended up being a success. I think, right? I think Twins was like a success, but yeah,
It was
but
a
it's not Die
success
Hard.
to me as a child, I will say
Exactly.
that.
I mean, yeah, another movie my dad watched a ton. But also I do think you have to ask, would Die Hard have been Die Hard with Arnold? Because part of what I think makes Die Hard are its two leads and the fact that they're kind of qualitative shifts. Because not just Bruce Willis, I do think the Hans Gruber character being different is also super significant. And a lot of film critics kind of credit the Gruber character in that way too. They write about it a lot. In many ways, he's written more about than John McClane, to be honest with you. So Bruce Willis at that time, if people remember, he was huge on a TV show called Moonlighting with Sybil Shepherd. And Moonlighting was kind of Sybil Shepherd's comeback after her movie career had kind of hit a big speed bump. She was supposed to become a really huge film actress, and she did good stuff in the 70s. It's hit a speed bump. Then Moonlighting became this big sensation. And then Bruce Willis was on that show, and Bruce at the time, and if you read about him, he grew up as an army brat. Then he grew up in Jersey, working class guy. He has a very unremarkable kind of upbringing. Did the acting classes, went to Montclair State, to study some acting, and then got a TV show. People liked him, and he was a heartthrob at that time. And I remember Moonlighting, and I remember his vibe on Moonlighting, how we see Bruce Willis now was not how anyone imagined that he could become in this kind of action vehicle. He was this kind of heartthrobby, white duty, kind of he's the bartender that everybody wants to, that the ladies chat with, and he tries to be cool or something at the spot, right? He's he's that guy. And they go to him with many people saying no. They have this thing called Cinema Score, and they basically said if you cast Bruce Willis, it's probably going to be a failure, right? And they kept telling him this is not a good idea. But Silver and Gordon at that time really felt that it was probably really smart to kind of change the quality of the action star. They wanted to kind of do this kind of working man. And they don't say this, but I do kind of think their experience with Lethal Weapon made them think this. I think the kind of shift they made with Lethal Weapon and the fact that it was a success and they could have this kind of character, I think they felt, yeah, we could probably do something like this. And it's just kind of their politics. If we've talked about the two of them, they're into this kind of concept that the rugged individual who's not polished with the West Point military or some kind of big old muscular Arnold. Those are the people that are probably gonna be the ones to really to knock out the real threatening shit that's coming into our society, right? That's the other thing. This is also another film about people coming in, right, and who are going to be the best and the brightest. And the film takes a clear position. It's not going to be the rank and file. No, it's not going to be the upper end of the cops. It's not going to be the FBI, which is also hilarious in this fucking movie. It's going to be the street soldier, John McClane, right? The singular street soldier, and Powell. I also think Powell is another one too. Him and Powell, played by Reginald VelJohnson, are gonna be the ones. They paid Willis a lot of money though. That's one of the interesting things. He got paid a ton of money because he turned it down. And the only reason why he ended up doing it is because he didn't want to leave Moonlighting yet, because Moonlighting was very successful. He's making a lot of money on TV. He didn't want to leave Moonlighting yet, but I think Sybil Shepherd, she got pregnant. So they were going to have to take some time off. So he shot some of it with Moonlighting, and then also they had a big break and they were able to finish it. And then also it killed Moonlighting by that point. The film, it just launched Bruce Willis into being a major action star. But yeah, I mean, it was this risk, but I think it was this risk that had a calculated want in how they wanted to start thinking about action stars as not needing this requirement of like big muscles, but like grit and really what the idea of maleness is like a maleness that may be more relatable, right? Because Bruce Willis is not, he's not popping out big muscles, but he's tough as nails. And I mean, we talk about it every time he's like fighting somebody, he's like cursing, "You fucking motherfucker!" Like he's like beating the people up. Like, it's so vulgar, and it's like, yeah, I remember my dad watching this movie and like, he gets into it. And I can think of probably when I was 15, I was like, yeah, yeah. I could think that I could do it too. Because, me imagining that I'm like Arnold ain't happening. I don't got pythons that big on my arm. I don't got big old arms. So that's the thing with Willis. I just think there is this shift in that they wanted to push. And ultimately it was successful for them. And it changed the quality of how we deal with movies now.
Yeah, I mean, I read somewhere, and I don't know how reliable, but some of the reasons some of the bigger names turned it down allegedly was that it was like too um that they thought that that the character, right, was like not strong enough, like that there was the kind of emotional psychological stuff with his wife. He's also, I guess it's actually in the script, and you see it in the movie too, that he's actually looking for help, right? Like, so he's actually trying to get the police to come in, and he's trying to get more support from law enforcement, send in the cavalry, right? And the argument being that, like, if it's Arnold or if it's Stallone, it's like, we don't need help, right? Like, we are the military, which you could see through obviously films like Rambo and Commando and all of that kind of stuff. This kind of like, I am a one-man army, which in many ways this movie has. But the I guess they're just saying narratively within the script, and again, I don't know how true this is, that when they were pitched it, they didn't like that, you know, he's trying to sort out stuff with his wife, and that, he is, admitting he's wrong in the relationship, and he's seeking help, and all of these kind of things, that they felt like it was like a kind of a weaker, or like, I guess as the right would say, a sort of beta male figure in a certain way, which is hilarious. But and I don't again like I don't know how true that is of Arnold or Stallone or anybody else, but that was kind of one of the things that I saw written up.
I couldn't see Stallone wanting to take this movie. This totally is anti his project, and same with Arnold. And Arnold and then would have came in there and like totally made them rewrite it. He'd have been like, look, like you got to change this, like the whole thing, like with the even like the end scene with the gun, the hide gun. Nah, man, there's no hidden gun. You know what I'm saying? Like, bruh, I'm walking there, guns blazing, right? I just did a movie where I beat an alien that's double my size. You know what I'm saying? Like, I'm not this skinny little motherfucker from Germany. He's like, bruh, it's not happening. Like, it totally doesn't fit the script, right? And I think probably for someone like Gibson, it probably had to do more with the risk factor of just doing an action film and doing another one a year later. It probably was too much for him to kind of comprehend, and they probably told him like, tone it down. You might have gotten lucky with Lethal Weapon, right? This one, we don't really know about.
Yeah. And Willis does kind of get typecast for a little while, I think, because of this film too, right? So
Well,
yeah.
yeah, I mean, his career is very. We can talk about that maybe a little later, like towards the end. His career
Yeah.
is very weird. He has a very fits and starts career. I mean, the for him, I mean, even with the second Die Hard is not successful. Really, it wasn't really. It's not till the third, right? That they kind of reformulate the film, the series to kind of like be successful. But he has a very fits and starts career, though he stays a megastar for a really, really long time, for a multitude of reasons. So I think another thing to kind of bring in is, and we can start talking about the movie maybe from there, is Alan Rickman. character. And Alan Rickman plays Hans Gruber in the film, the main villain. So Rickman, this was his first film, and the director McTiernan saw him in a play, I think, of Dangerous Liaisons, and said, "This guy is just a phenomenal actor. He could be really good." Rickman at first did not want to do it either. Rickman was very not into the film's kind of original kind of like delivery of the character. Um, he made suggestions. Oh, it actually was Joel Silver who saw him. He made suggestions to Joel Silver. He says, "Don't put him in like the classic garb of like the terrorist, right?" He says, "Put him in a suit." Right? Um, can we? He said he liked the kind of mercenary thought, but like even on the time when they were shooting, he was doing on-set rewrites of like certain parts of like things that he would say. Like the whole thing they discovered about the part where he speaks English is actually something they discovered that Rickman was like he would play around and speak in an American accent. I'm not speak in an American accent. He would like just do it, and they were like, "We got to do that." And one of the interesting things that Rickman has said is that he didn't see Hans as a villain. He said he didn't want to play him as a villain, though I think the film frames him as a villain. But he said he didn't want to play him as a villain. He said he wanted to play him as a person who just kind of wants what he wants, and he needs to get what he gets, and he's kind of smarter than everybody else. All the other thing he was really objectionable to. He says he understood the scenes where Hans would have to like shoot somebody or like really kill somebody, like when he kills Takagi and when he kills Ellis. But he said like him like he objected to like there's like a scene, I think they're supposed to like really like throw Bonnie Bedelia's characters. Like, I'm not doing that. So he kind of also like shifts the villain character. And we can talk about this when we get into the film a bit more. But a lot of that was driven because of Rickman. Rickman wanted to kind of go in a different direction with the villain. And it's interesting when you like kind of read postmortems about the movie, people have this like perception of Hans Gruber as like one of the also big shifts in villains. And I'm actually not opposed to that kind of like perception. I do think it's a huge shift. Because the other thing that's really interesting is that people tended to root for Hans. And I honestly, often when I watch the film, I feel like I do. Like, I feel like I do end up rooting for him kind of in the movie in weird ways. Like, especially, or in a period of my life, he's definitely the part of it. I like Alan. I liked, rest in peace, Alan Rickman as an actor. I think he was just a really phenomenal actor. But there's something about the way he's framed and he's played in the movie that he becomes something you root for. But what's weird about it is the fact that it becomes devoid of politics. It's this kind of devoid of politics individualism that you end up rooting for. And that's where the film gets really sneaky, in my opinion.
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, heist movies in general, which this isn't, I mean, this is a weird movie in, because it's like not really heist genre, even though it is a heist. I think it's like, it has to do with kind of the locus of the film and who you're focusing on as characters, right? Because usually a heist movie is more focused on the thieves as like the tragic, figures or whatever who
Right.
like, are just trying to, their mom has cancer, whatever. Like in a lot of ways, this is why I like heist movies, is a lot of times there is kind of a critique that capitalism is a rigged system and you're trying to get something back, from it. And so I say that to say I usually do root for the people, the villain, the people who are doing the heist in heist movies. But it's funny because for me, it's like, I do find myself rooting for Bruce Willis in these movies, even though I know I shouldn't.
Yeah, because they're
So
devoid, because they are devoid of, because
there's
Hans is
no,
so devoid of any
yeah,
kind of,
there's
yeah.
no justification. Like
I'm just rooting for Hans because, yeah,
you have no reason why these guys are doing this thing,
right.
right? Like it is
Other
not,
than for their own gain, right? I'm only
totally.
rooting for him because honestly, he's a good actor. Like he play is because of how he plays it. And then also like honestly, sometimes, especially with the character of Ellis, you just like him more than the other guy, right? Or and we'll get into it. Like probably start the film now, or like the FBI. I mean, the FBI or the head of the police, the deputy chief. They're just so trash, right? You know, and the way these films are kind of situated, they make you have to try to root for someone in a moment. So you have to. So I'm like, well, get him, Hans, get him. So
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah, so let's work into the movie and we can talk about
yeah.
other stuff later.
So the film, start. I find it funny, like the music comes on and there's like this like really low tone and like the jingle bells, die hard, right? I mean,
I will say
it's
it's such a Christmas movie. Like anybody who says this is not a Christmas movie, like what the hell is wrong with you? Like
I
it is
mean, they
like
have reindeer sounds.
Christmas songs throughout it, a Christmas party, like
Yeah, yeah,
so many
yeah.
references. Ho ho
But
ho!
the
I got a machine gun.
but I think what I think throws people off is like I think two things. So like the film is shot in this really interesting like anamorphic stretch, right? It's like a really widescreen film, right? So there's a way that the images have this like distortion because of the anamorphic lens that I think it always throws people off because when they think of like I think a Christmas movie, they're thinking something that has a bit more, at least maybe pungent like kind of saturation, but a kind of like neutral saturation. While this is like very desaturated, there's not a lot of bright colors in the film, and if they are, they're totally toned down. um this goes, I think, into a trajectory that was started with, I think, To Live and Die in LA, which is a film where you have to do of shooting LA in that kind of yellow haze. Like in the early sequence when you see the limousine going to Nakatomi, like it has which I actually find very consistent with LA. You can feel the smog when you watch the film, even when you get in on the plane, because like one of the first sequences is you see him arrive in LA on a plane, and there's this guy that he talks to, the fist with your toes guy, and like there's like this like haze to the air there, right? So they're not shooting LA as like a promised land; they're kind of shooting LA as a weird site where strange things happen, because like one of the very first things that John McClane sees is like, this woman run up and like hug her man and all this stuff in the thing. And he goes, California. He makes all these like jokes. It's like he's being the typical New Yorker that I have been, I will admit, when I've gone to LA. He's being the typical New Yorker / East Coaster going to California and like complaining about its like over jovialness, it's kind of new Americana capital stuff, which is like a total difference from saying like Beverly Hills Cop, which came out like 3 years before, which has this kind of look of Beverly Hills and LA as like, really popping energy, right? Like, yeah, like even though Eddie Murphy in Beverly Hills Cop is like the fish out of water, he's kind of like, yeah, I can fuck with this though. I can fuck with this though. You just gotta let me be me, right? McClane ain't having none of this. This is weird, right? These people are weird. They do weird shit, and it looks weird. It feels weird. You definitely get a vision of LA as like this oddball civilization.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, you have I mean, on the plane, there's the scene he sees the gun, right? And the guy's like looking at it like all crazy. He's like, "It's okay, I'm a cop. I've been doing this for 11 years," which I can't remember what he was responding to, but something about a guy who was like, "I've been doing this for 10 years."
Says he's been
Um,
flying. He's been flying for 9 years.
right, it's the toes thing.
The
It's
fist,
like,
the fist
yeah,
with your toes, which is like becomes
that's
like
right.
which is one of the like the longest like threads ever in a movie. They really start the
Yeah,
no shoes thread like in the first scene of the movie. Like really, y'all really want to make this very significant.
absolutely. And then yeah, I just noted too he's smoking a cigarette in the LAX terminal too, which of course you could do in 1988, but um yeah, it was somebody somebody kissed him on the cheek at the Christmas party. That's when he's like, California,
It's
and
the
there are
second
these.
time. It's the second
Oh,
time.
okay. He says that.
He says it
Okay.
when the woman like runs to her boyfriend, and then the second time he does it, like it's like they keep stamping it, but it's the second time he
Yeah.
says it. That the part where the guy kisses him is like totally contrived, making everyone in LA and in corporate America look weird.
Yeah, and then you get Argyle, the limo driver. Like, so there's also, I mean, this is kind of funny in it too. It's like there's these hints to that, like he's a little racist because like he's like, why is this black guy driving my limo? Like you could just see it on his face, right? And then yeah, I took that as like a homophobic thing too when he gets kissed on the cheek, that it's like, uh everybody in Hollywood's gay or whatever, right? The kind of, conservative, tropes that are still ongoing. But yeah, there's a lot of those little elements, and it's very New York also. I mean, it's like, I think that's a real thing for a lot of New Yorkers for sure, in terms of going to California and anywhere outside of New York, honestly.
I mean, totally. And look, man, I probably have said it, right? And I'm sure this movie probably influenced it when I've done it. But there is, and I think it becomes significant. I think when we start getting into Nakatomi, I think they're using it as a way to comment about kind of like new business, new capital, which becomes associated with, and we'll have to talk about Japan at the time again, and their kind of financial situation with the US. But Japan, and then attaching that also to then his wife's character played by Bonnie Bedelia, her as like kind of like new working girl era feminism, right? And that kind of like lumping all the like LA, right? Ellis and the cocaine, weirdos, Japan, women wanting to have work. Like it becomes this big cloud of what the fuck is going on with society. And it's such a reactionary like vision. And there's a way that like you could kind of suggest that, oh, well, they're kind of admitting it, that there's some reactionary thinking. But the film, when you think about it cathartically, it still defends that the core basis of that attitude, right? And you get totally sucked up into it. The other little thing that I want to bring up, because it goes throughout the movie, that always kind of fucks with me with this movie, is how they deal with Bruce Willis as a kind of like sexual creature. So he's leaving the plane, right? And there's this look with a stewardess, right? And she's just like just eyeing him, and he gives the eyes back, and boom, right? And throughout the film, like I tried to like count it. It was like every 20 minutes, there's these like weird references towards like sex in the movie, where like you can get it if you want, or I kind of want it, or there's like a sexual thing about maledom that they need to do, like when he sees the pictures of the naked women inside Nakatomi and he has like girls, right? There's this constant like refrain towards like male aggressive sexuality that's in it, a heterosexuality also, I want to say too. And it's so weird to me because it totally just, in some ways it comes like totally out of character, or not out of character, out of like left field. But I feel like it's necessary for this movie that is so bent up on just like hyper action and hyper violence, to also remind you that, yeah, he's also a sexual being, right? He can bust guns, and what else do you think he can do as well?
Yeah. It's also an interesting thing a little bit about New York in this time period versus LA in this time period, like, because it's very different now. Like, I feel like New York in the 80s, right? It's coming out of the major financial crisis, like, like, you could buy houses at this time in Manhattan and in the boroughs for very little money. Like, it was not uh it's so different now. Like, nowadays it is just sort of like Disneyland for rich people, like it's
Hmm.
like global capital, like, where do you want to buy your floor or your flat or your, high rise apartment or whatever, in a way that just makes it, very difficult for working class people to even live in, right? Whereas in the 80s, like it was still trying to get back on its feet as a place that was like worthy of, big capital investment in a certain way. I mean, I don't want to overstate that, but like there is a kind of, I think, dynamic too between like, Bruce Willis as being in this movie, being seen as this like very sort of working class, white beat cop, whatever, or I don't know if he's a beat cop, but cop from New York, right? And then coming into LA where it's all, mega corporations and high fashion and cocaine and and it's not as though these worlds are like that different, but what I would say is I feel like there was a bigger difference, like
Yeah.
in certain ways culturally, but and just in a class. I mean, obviously there's always lots of working class and poor people in LA area as well. But LA in the 80s, I felt like had a very different, you know, I don't know. It's just different from New York now. New York
Ye-
change with like the Giuliani and Bloomberg like mayorships, and where it is now is like a very stark difference.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, there's also like, I mean, I wonder how much like 80s is still dealing with like the austerity kind of the late 70s kind of thoughts, like in terms of like the kind of like the ideology of New York. But I also always feel like it's like this old capital versus new capital thing, which I think goes right into Nakatomi, right? This idea that like New York is like an old capital place, so thus it's more rugged. So and it has a more, I don't want to say ethical, I would say a more rooted towards like classical American values capital, right? With all of it, all of the weirdness that that statement means, right? And then LA is like this era of new capital because like so one of the things to kind of point, and he gets into the conversation with Argyle, his limo driver, about his wife. So his wife, and they never really clear about what she was doing before. She's a very weird, the wife is such a weird, like typical of these movies. They're really weirdly written character. Um Played by Bonnie Bedelia, Holly McClane. So Holly has a job in LA that she got, and she had to move. And Argyle, I do find it funny. A shout out to the cat who played Argyle. I always forget his name. He does play it really well, like roasting him, about questioning his like, his kind of trying to be stoic. And he's like, come on, what she do? She beat you up, like why you there, right? And then he calls them out, right? He basically is like, yo, I have all these things, with my job, and I'm a cop, and I can't just leave everything. He says, so you basically thought that she wasn't gonna like work, figure it out, that she come running back to you, basically. So, but there's this idea that LA is like this new capital, because what kind of ends up setting up is when you realize that she's working for this Japanese company, right? And they have like a new high-rise skyscraper in LA. And I think the other thing to think about is like the whole, like, skyscrapers are things that are like not necessarily thought about for LA, right? It's not a skyscraper city in the way that New York is. So like this kind of shot of you like rolling up to downtown LA with a big ass skyscraper, and they make sure to isolate the Nakatomi like image as to say that it's kind of singular. It's like the new capital, right? And the fact that they're like open to a kind of like newer, feminist leadership played by Holly Gennaro McClane shows that like, it's like a kind of like a new thing with LA, right? And we have to go back to basically this is the time of Japan and their kind of like, economic leadership, which was like all the rage in growing up, in movies, TV show episodes, newspapers. Japan's winning the trade war, the economic war, Sony. And then also like really, xenophobic stuff. Is Japan taking over the US? I remember shit like, Sony and all that. Is Sony gonna infiltrate the US and all this type of stuff? And I don't know what your feeling is, Jay, on this one. Like, they definitely show that this company has power in terms of economic like weight, like they have tons and tons, but I don't feel like the film goes fully into it, into like the worst of the reactionary positions towards like the Japanese takeover. as much as like they don't really deal with it, I think, after a while. Like they kind of set it up as like a thing. Like Japan has this kind of like stronghold financially here in LA. They're part of the new capital. Like so when he comes to the building, one of the things that Takagi tells him is that, you know, the building isn't even finished, right? Like there's like it's like a new project, right? And then, I mean, there is the great line. What does he say? The what is it? The Pearl Harbor line? It's so good.
Yeah, it's we couldn't get you with bombs, so we got you with Walkman or something like that. Like
Tape
uh,
decks. It was something with tape.
tape
I think
decks. Yeah,
I do have it here. I gotta find it. I'll find it
yeah.
right
Well,
now.
yeah. While you're looking for that, yeah. I mean, I agree. I think there was so for people who weren't there or don't remember this, there was a certain type of like US capital based anxiety about Japan overtaking the United States. That was very similar to what people see now with China. And it was always a little bit complicated because it was very clear that Japan was an ally, right? So it like was very clear that they were not anymore. I mean, which is it's all fascinating, right? Because of course Japan actually did, attack the United States, right? But after Pearl Harbor, I mean not after the atom bombs are dropped, right? And the United States, of course, commits like the worst war crime in, history, basically, in those two bomb droppings. Um, then you get the peace deals and whatnot, and they really become what certain scholars, I think Samir Amin has referred to this, other people have as well, like kind of like the triad, right? Or whatever of like looking at the United States, Western Europe, and Japan as like kind of the three heads of global capitalism and imperialism. And obviously, Japan, like, sort of demilitarized in this arrangement, right? That was like kind of part of it, but then became very heavy in terms of like, investment, technology, and all these other kind of areas. And yeah, so there was this concern that you would see even on like, 60 Minutes or nightly news or these kind of things, morning news, right? About the rise of Japan and whether the United States would be overtaken by Japan. And I do think that this movie is, like you said, not like going too far into it, but is definitely like that is sort of what is represented by this company and this corporation.
So the line that McClane, so he gets to the Christmas party and right, it's like it's buck wild. Like you see people doing coke and more him oogling at women, like long stares at the ladies there. The guy kisses him on the cheek, you know, and he is looking for his wife, and he basically meets the CEO of the business, Takagi, right? And they're in this conversation where they also will meet Ellis, and we'll talk about Ellis a little bit. Um, and he asked Takagi, he says, I didn't realize they celebrated Christmas in Japan. And Takagi's response is, hey, we're flexible. Pearl Harbor didn't work out, so we got you with tape decks. So there's like this acknowledgement of yeah, like we is trying to do something, but I'm gonna make a joke about it, because the other thing, and we'll get to when Gruber singles out Takagi, is they're very clear to make Takagi someone who immigrated before the war, right? Which I think is very interesting, that he's not someone who's come after the war. He was someone who came before World War II and grew up. So he's very much an American Japanese person, which I found very, very interesting. And that's something that I don't, oh no, because the book doesn't have them in Japan. It's an American oil company, so it doesn't even matter. But that's an interesting kind of like thread line that they kind of use in it. But yeah, go ahead.
Just quickly, good point made here by Chidi Macha that, technically the United States was, Pearl Harbor was not part of the United States. It was really a project of the United States
We'll talk.
putting a military base on land that was not theirs, right? So yeah, no, that's solid analysis and correct myself on that.
Yeah. So you begin to get kind of like the people who work for the corporation, right? So you get to see that like Holly is like very much the like the systems operational person of like the entire corporation, right? And I was like, if you look at it, it's like mostly white people and like mixed sprinkled in with like Japanese people, right? Right. Or Asian people, right? In the business. I feel like you don't see a lot of other races there if I'm correct. You definitely do see a good amount of women, right? So I definitely think that they're trying to kind of paint this idea of like, new capital has this kind of like, a mixture. It has like more white women, more this and that, right? White woman in leadership. Like she's in a blouse. She's also not like in a suit, which I found very interesting. And like it's like a red or like a peachish kind of color. I found that very interesting, like the kind of color they have her in. She has like a reddish hair. Her name is Holly. Like but then she's strong because then they have their conversation, right? And it's there's always this thing with her of like being, and then even with her name like Gennaro, I find like like not making her like Stewart or something very like it's Gennaro. There's like this like ethnic thing that they're trying to play with about the two of them, and I put those in quotations. It's like it's all very like weirdly coded towards, I think, all of like Silver McTiernan's, all of their different kind of ideologies around who are like the socially mobile people that we need to have as like the new like role models towards everything. But the other person to bring it is Ellis, though, because I think Ellis is a classic character who's changed from the book. So apparently they said Ellis is significant in the book, and they said that like because they got rid of the daughter thing that they like, he basically loses a certain kind of purchase, but they were like, we got to keep this character in there. So because in the book he's a coke user, so he's like the head of like international relations, and I do find it hilarious that the international relations dude is the most capitalist, the most selfish cokehead there is, right? Like they walk into the office and he's doing coke right in Holly's office, right? It's just like fucking hilarious. But like honestly, I can believe it. Like he's totally that dude in that corporate. Like he feels like a very exact real character. I'm like, yeah, I do think there were lots of Ellises in the 80s. Like their businesses were rampant with Ellises.
Yeah, I think he's the most 80s character in the whole movie, honestly. Like it's like you want to know what the 80s is all about like in America. Look at Ellis. At least white corporate America.
Dude, and he's funny. The guy plays him so funny. He's
Yeah, he
hilarious.
kills.
His little lines, he's so good. He's like, he has like this laugh. He's like, like it's so funny, right? And you see, he's like trying to kind of flirt with Holly, and they do this. This is where, like, when they make women characters is only for the self-serving of men, because what they want to do with Holly is say that she's like defiant in a particularly like hmm, I don't want to say justified because I don't know if they justify her defiance of her husband as much as they give her like a position, right? You
She's
go ahead.
she's I think she's a representation of like just sort of progress, right? Like
Right.
so it's like so you know, this is the like 70s 80s thing, right? Is women moving out. And I mean, like there are some real realities that have to be discussed. Like I mean, I realize these are both media, representations or whatever, but like go watch how women are treated in Mad Men, right? And then like look at this, right? And
Right.
like again, like both fictionalized, both like, you know, propagandistic pieces of a different sort, but I think there is some truth to that like white women within corporate America that for a long time, right, you were the secretaries and you also were treated like shit by all of the men who were over you, and like you had to worry about people trying to do weird sexual shit to you and everything else, right? And obviously, I mean, this stuff still goes on, right? We have all of these Me Too things coming out from Hollywood and all these other things like music industry, etc. But So she, I think, is supposed to be that very like liberal white feminist, image of progress, right? And it's interesting because Bruce is both representing like kind of the reaction to it, right? Like he didn't move out even though she got the job that was obviously like the better paying, more socially mobile position, right? He decided he's going to stay in New York and like fuck his wife and them kids, like basically like they can just go and do their own thing and hopefully they'll come back to me, the man. But then also as the movie progresses, like it's particularly in that moment when he feels like he's gonna die, and he tells Carl Winslow, I'm sorry, I'm just gonna call him Carl, but he tells him that you have to get a message to my wife that that I feel like things are gonna go bad, and then he kind of does the whole like you're the best thing that ever happened to me, and some of it is like really just classic BS kind of like macho groveling back that you don't really necessarily believe, but in that little monologue or like letter that never really gets delivered because he doesn't die, um you know, he is sort of saying like you were right, like you did the right thing, and I should have gotten over myself and my ego and come with you. I was being the macho, whatever, reactionary or whatever. And I think so that like thematically within the film, I think that's kind of what the two of them represent, and they're trying to show that vision of progress as like, yeah, she is doing the right thing by doing this. He's the one that has the issue.
Yeah, and because they have this conversation um in her office where she basically says, I would love for you to stay over. And because one of the big things that they show is when he goes into Nakatomi, when he searches for her name isn't the name that the married name, McClane, it's not there. So then he goes for her maiden name, Gennaro, and he finds it and he does the Bruce like like so disgusted, right? And he holds this until they have this conversation that's like seeming very warm, like they're going to reconcile, that she misses him and she's being very open. And he's like, you ain't gonna have my name. You're not gonna keep my name except when you want to use checks and all this type of stuff. And it gets very male, and she stands up to him and like totally like justify ways, but the and to be correct ways. But what's interesting is, and we'll get to the end of the film, there's a way that they do both that I think is kind of funky. Is that they are able to give her her position, but also suggest that his kind of right to a certain kind of traditional familial like vision and like conduct is also justified. Like he actually should be able to have that, right? And there's like two key moments at the end of the film that kind of happen that like totally, it doesn't invalidate what she says. It's basically said we can meet a middle ground, right? Around these kind of like old American values and the kind of liberal progress, which in a way is kind of true to liberalism in this kind of way. It actually is the truth if you think about it, how they think about charting progress within, liberalism.
Yeah, because he's also like, you know, the whole thing is because he's in the film, he's like the most manly, like, he literally the name of the film is Die Hard, right? Like you can't kill this guy, right? Like, and so there is this, I can't remember, and I don't know if this is one of the lines you were thinking of, but there is the whole thing of like kind of like you got a good man like there or whatever at the end of the film. So there definitely is this, like you say, like kind of meet in the middle of like he needs to recognize what he has in her and she needs to recognize what she has in him, and that's kind of the love story arc of the film. You're muted.
So by that point, you get that, and then they really like rush in to like Hans and like the crew basically taking over the building. And it's so interesting how it's painted because you also meet Theo, and Theo is like another, and like I said, this film has these three black people positioned. So you have Argyle, who's the limo driver. He's kind of like the funky, he's like the funny like guy in the car, and he's it's funny, like McClane has two black helpers. Argyle and Powell, really, which is just hilarious, right? And then Hans has his own black helper, right? He has Theo. And it's basically like the two, I don't know if you want to call them second in command. I mean, Carl definitely is second in command, I think, to Hans, right? In the film. Theo is like the specialist, right? Like he's the one who has the talents that no one else has. So they come in and he does this, this monologue about Magic Johnson. And this is the other thing about the movie that I think people like. It's all these like jokes, but they're better to me than like Schwarzenegger jokes, because like Schwarzenegger jokes are like one lines. They're like these like long through line jokes, and also just done by better actors. Like the guy, like he's this nerdy dude. He passes to Magic. He has this really like nerdy ass voice that I've always found so funny. And he's such a weird character because you're used to like black people having a certain kind of vibe to them, and you get this nerdy brother with glasses, right? And he walks in and he's part of the terrorist troop, right? And it's just kind of funny. So you have the whole crew start to be able to like take over the building. And one of the things that I began to think about, I was like, wow, man, remember the world before like security before metal detectors? Right? And the world before, like, certain types of like armed security guards. But then I have to say the film, and we'll talk about it, it's totally stoking the open borders are a problem. These open borders are a problem. This lack of security is a problem because if we didn't have these open borders, you know what I'm saying? Then maybe we wouldn't have people taking over Nakatomi Plaza and terrorists trying to take over buildings, which is like the part of this movie that's really, really wild to me. Like this is what Americans imagine. This is like part of the American imagination, right? That your building could one day get taken over by a group of terrorists who have rocket launchers. I'm like, come on, bro. Like, when does this happen? That's why, like, I'm like watching this movie again, and I'm like, what the fuck am I watching? Like, there's a moment where I feel like I would love everyone to like take a step back from Die Hard, like even as a piece of fantasy, to just go, wait a minute, this is kind of fucking nuts. And a big ass crew of people going to come up here with rocket launch. They have missile launchers, right? Right? Like they have a missile launcher and C4 out the wazoo. Yeah, that could really happen at my office. Right? It's just nuts.
It is really wild because also like every terror plot or bank robbery is like so much humbler than this when you actually think about like what the people have and like and it is I think it's a form of that in itself is a form of propaganda, right? It's this idea that like first of all that the cops are so sophisticated, which they're not shown as sophisticated in this film, which is another thing we'll talk about, but that they that the idea that they have to be able to battle, like go to war with this, right? Like, and that's kind of one of the things about the level of violence in the film, is that this idea that like the people who are going to do this criminal conspiracy have somehow like, yeah, like you said, like everything, like rocket launchers, C4, they have this hacker who knows how to break into everything, like all this kind of stuff, when most of the major heists or are just way more or terror plots or whatever, or actual anti-colonial revolts or struggles, right, are much less, the people are always operating with lesser technology and less sophistication. And so the idea too is that like there's also embedded in that is this justification of this surveillance infrastructure, right? But then the funny thing is that even that we have this belief that these systems are impenetrable, right? Or that they're like so difficult to overcome. And that is something that we've internalized too, right? Like it's just not true. Like people get away with stuff, and I mean, obviously, whatever, but like things happen within the world that are not stopped by all of this surveillance and policing all the time. And it doesn't require people to have the kind of like arsenal of weaponry that people have here.
Right. And that's what then makes the film really interesting, because on that level you can see like, so they use like these like radio communicators. They're very coordinated. They basically you pretty much figure out in the film that they've basically studied the building, all its machinations, how to thwart them and how to get by them, right? And I don't know if there was ever a moment when I watched the film, but I'm sure other people did, before the reveal comes out that they don't really care. And the reveal happens pretty early in the heist, that they don't really care about anything political. They're just doing this for the money, right? It comes pretty early. Um, that like it's interesting to be able to thwart that for people who have principle. Like they would never do that. They would never show that like people who have really deep principle also could like develop the skill to really take out a business or like like the state. They would never put that in a big mega movie because they don't want to push that. They only want to push that as like the people who want to do who have those kind of skills, who are that slick, are these like degenerate, unprincipled, politically nebulous at best, or politically totally nihilistic, and they're just out for self, right? Because when they go in there, like they're like paramilitary, like they're rocking, they're shooting, they're doing all this. And then the funny thing is, when you like the makeup of the group, you have a lot. You're hearing like the German spoken, which also is funny that the movie throughout the entire thing they don't subtitle the German, which I know is purposeful because they want it to be like this like scary foreign thing, and they want you to never actually emotionally connect with them. And the way they speak the German is like so guttural. Like I can almost see McTiernan say, "Really, I want you to stretch out the they're really like stretching out the German. It's so funny. Like I don't want to do it because like it's like offensive to like make fun of it in that kind of way. But like I'm in the house like, like they're really taking it to like the highest level, right? But you have German guys. I think one of the other guys is Italian, the Marco. I think he's supposed to be Italian. I'm not quite sure if he's Italian or like Spanish, right? You have the Chinese guy. You have a white American, but he has a Southern accent, and a black man, right? So the makeup of this crew is odd, but also kind of like what they would think, right? Like the black man's gonna defect, probably. If it's gonna be an American defect, to be a black man and some weird guy from the South, right? You know what I'm saying? He won't be a city refined person. The German we all know because they're German people, right? And then an Italian, because Italians are, they do weird shit also. And then a Chinese guy, right? We'll get, it's perfect. Yeah, the Chinese, they're it's totally like it's like playing with everyone's weird, very, very strange, like latent stereotypes of who would be a terrorist without principle also. I do think the without principle thing is like so major in this movie. Like it's like the big thing that like kind of like underbellies the entire thing.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we can go there because like, so
yeah.
I mean, thematically, in terms of what happens in the film, obviously, like you have the Christmas party, you have Ellis doing coke, you have this, and then you have, them come in, and yeah, of course, Bruce Willis is turning he's making fists with his toes. I don't understand why he can't just grab his fucking shoes as the like this is the thing. the thing that bothers me the most about this movie, right, is just that like, what did he get separated from his shoes? I mean, I know he's taking them off to do the thing, and I know the terrorists come in that moment, right? But I think I would have just taken a moment to get my shoes.
Got my kicks. Yeah, like they should have had a shot where like a quick thing where like the shoes were like in the room and he couldn't get them. Like he like a quick shot that the shoes were like in the other room and he can't run in there because maybe he left the shoes in the part and he couldn't get it. But I know it is such
exactly.
Like,
if he saw his shoes and there's a terrorist between him and his shoes, I'd be like, okay, all right, I can go with the whole thing.
I can get like, damn, I can't get my shoes, but they don't do that, and it becomes like the longest like gag in like the history of like action films. Like it's like the fact that they get it from the first scene all the way to I'm at I mean like to like 90% into the movie where like the big final moment they want to have with the shoes is getting his feet fucked up, right? Is
Right.
like it takes like to like minute like hour one for hour one 1 hour and 45 minutes into the movie to get that to happen.
When the
Um
terrorists figure out that he doesn't have shoes and are like, "Oh, let's
right,
break glass everywhere."
shoot the glass. Right? It's like so fucking funny, man. But so I will say when Rickman comes into the movie, I'm with like I gotta say, like all these years, I've just loved watching him in the movie. Like he's so his looks, his gaze. What they credit about the qualitative shift about his character is that they said he changed the kind of what they would call like the intelligent villain, right? His like nonchalantness towards the kind of whole kind of situation. The fact that you know he doesn't show like brute force in terms of like him having to like go be with them shooting the gun. They usually do that with like the villains, right? They're like the most talented. Like you could probably guess that maybe Hans isn't the most talented. That'd probably be Carl. Carl is the assassin. We go send out Carl to go out and kill someone, but Hans is deadly because that sequence with Takagi, where he shoots Takagi, is like pretty brutal, and it's like he doesn't okay, right? He just doesn't care, right? So they really credit. I mean, there's people who say things like this is like the greatest movie villain of all time. There's like it's like really like lauded in like movie villain. I don't really care. I don't have a thing in that. I just know Alan Rickman as an actor. I enjoy watching him. Like I'm on the screen with him, and like he's saying his little lines, right? And he's just fucking funny, right? And he sets up very quickly like that he doesn't really care about this stuff, right? So they come in, they like the guns and it's like shooting and all the stuff is happening and like they're collecting all the people, the terrorists, right? And he's kind of like center mass. He doesn't move a lot. And then eventually he gets to where he has to go find Takagi, right? And that's the sequence where he begins reading out Takagi's like bio. And in it, I don't have it written down, but they mentioned that he immigrated like before the war, right? And I find that very interesting in the kind of narrative of him because they make
He was
him
also interned. Yeah.
in turn, yes, and in turn, so he's distinctively Japanese American in that way, and I find that really important. Like they didn't want to make him the other kind of character in it, and I found that just really interesting, especially also if you're thinking about because they also make the point that Hans is West German, he's not East German in the film, which I also found very interesting. And I'd be curious, Jay, if you had any thoughts around that, right? They make him West German. So they have that Japan, West Germany, Japan, and this like kind of reconstituting of the world situation, right? And it's like the movie's like it's like drawing on politics, but then like not really dealing with them in any kind of way. But like this like needle pointing in politics, which I just think is just so indicative of really of movies writ large, but definitely of like 80s America. Like they really wanted to like poke on these little ideas that we would immediately have towards a Japanese person in an internment camp, a West German who, because he says I have a classical education, Hans, right, who has a classical education. They're like pinpointing all these little triggers to kind of get you to think about things, but never really landing on anything. So, like, for a person who may not know anything, it doesn't mean anything. For a person who knows like a couple of things, it might spark something. But I think it ultimately does is it like positions them in like really two-dimensional ways that you can look at them as characters that are all subservient to the kind of overall really reactionary politics of this movie.
Yeah, I mean, I think the we talked about this a little bit with Nighthawks too, but I think there is something to the West German thing. I mean, I think as somebody noted in the chat earlier, Bruce Willis is actually West German. So his mother is, well, he's born in West Germany. His mother's German. His father was an American soldier, right? So like he's German American. But um, the but in terms of thinking about terror, right? It actually was the case, as far as I can think of, or examples I can think of, where especially, well, I don't want to say so. The GDR did have, East Germany did have like some support of anti-colonial movements for sure, but it wasn't, in my limited study of it, it wasn't as often in the form of like them. They participated in certain groups, right? Like support for, say, Palestinian liberation or things like this, right? Um, in kind of supportive roles more. But like I think it's Red Army faction, right? And so like and they come out of West Germany. And I think that's the thing, is it's more the communists that are in these Western European countries that they're more worried about terrorism from. Partly, I think, because there is the politics of the Cold War. And so while there is always this fear of like espionage and sabotage and like stealing secrets and all these kind of things, it's less that there's a fear of like the Soviet Union or the GDR committing a terror attack in the United States, because geopolitically that would just be so disruptive, right? That it would, lead to a sort of ladder of escalation essentially between two nuclear powers. And so I think that some of it is that the the people who they think as more likely to do something like this would be something like, the Red Brigades or the Red Army faction or these different, these kind of groups. Um, I mean, it's still not like based in much evidence other than that there was stuff like that within Europe that happened. But again, with the Nighthawks thing and this, it's like kind of the importation of this. It's like a fear more than it is based in any kind of reality. Um, and the people who would be likely to do stuff like this in a US context would be part of US movements, right? Like whether it's Black Liberation Army or, Weather or May 19th or, these kind of organizations. And they also, I mean, that is one of the propagandistic elements of it, or the ways that the film is propagandistic, in my view, is that, you know, when they did those things, like when they did expropriations, it was to support like their movement or to support further anti-colonial activity, right? It wasn't just to like, self get a bunch of money for myself, right? Which is like very clearly what's happening here.
Yes, because like so one of the so the scene of the elevator with Takagi and Hans is really interesting. And I've always noticed this even as a kid. I just had no context because Arafat is a name that I've has been in my consciousness since I was a kid because my dad watched West television. My dad, for a lot of the weird problems that would happen in my house, my dad was always very pro-Palestinian. Right. That was something that he always had a very strong pro-Palestinian, someone like Arafat would be someone that would be like discussed in my home and looked at, um, from at the very least a supportive position. But when they bring up Arafat in this context, they bring him up about wearing an expensive suit. Right, he looks at Takagi's suit and he goes, "Nice suit," right? And he names the name of the suit and he says, "I have a few myself," right? And that's a kind of showing you like what are Hans's interests. They're not politics. They're into these kinds of bourgeois, trinkets. And then when he walks out in passing, is I heard that's where Arafat buys his as well, right? And it's doing this thing where saying that all of that shit is real bullshit. Like none of these guys are for real. None of this stuff is real. It's all honestly people trying to get shit for their own. There are no revolutionaries. And I really do think this movie is saying that. Like we're there maybe there was a time, we could discuss that another place. But in this moment in 1988, that shit is gone. It is now a heist for capital. People want capital
And
for
this is a
themselves
very,
also.
for sure. Yeah, and I mean I purposely put the book on the Jackal behind because this is like the whole argument around the Jackal as well. And he did have East Germans that worked with him and stuff like that. But um the and it's a very long right-wing project to divorce I mean it goes back to again that interview I keep referencing. It's in Safia Bukhari's book The War Before. There's a debate that takes place between Safia Bukhari, Ted Cruz, and Peter Thiel and a few other people. But in that whole debate, like Thiel and Cruz's line, and this is in 98, right, is all about like and it would become also their like Cruz's project as a lawyer, right, which people don't know that was to basically make it so that the United States had no responsibility to international law whatsoever, so that states could not be subordinated to international law, right? And so there was this long project that they were engaged in saying if you commit a crime, then you are prosecuted according to that crime. And this again, this like Frank Kitson talks about this in Low Intensity Operations. Like it was a form of judicial counterinsurgency, right? To say, okay, we have two options as the rulers of a state. We can directly repress revolutionary movements and just obliterate them and attack them. And of course, they do that. But the other is to treat everybody under the rule of law, right? And so then it says, okay, you kill somebody, you're a murderer. I don't care if you're a revolutionary. I don't care what your cause is. And this is exactly like what they're sort of arguing with Safia Bukhari in this. And she's talking about, well, under your rubric, right, there would have been no American Revolution. There would be, South Africa would still be under apartheid. Like she goes through all of these kind of examples of when violence is necessary historically, right? But their project, so this right-wing project is always to say like that the revolutionary shit, that ideological shit, that doesn't matter at all. Your struggle, like that doesn't matter. It's about whether you commit a crime or not, and we're going to prosecute you according to those crimes, right? So it is connected to that, I think, in terms of trying to make people's brains also go to that place of, oh, like they're not really about some revolutionary shit. They're criminals, right? Yeah.
Yeah, and like I do think it's a thing that, like you said, it's just traveled on, right? Except when you get to the 90s and you get to Islamophobia. When you get to like True Lies and things like that, it becomes about, like global jihad and things like this, right? They want to blow everything up, so forth and so on, right? But they do keep that, right? I mean, and like it didn't exist. I mean, you kind of had it with the taking of Pelham 123 in this in the 70s a little bit. Um, but I don't want to go down that rabbit hole too much. But this is definitely a big like qualitative shift in like how they want to think about these things. So you have Hans, you have the crew, like they're ruthless. I mean, he just shoots Takagi. And like yeah, the movie's violence is really, I mean, it's really visceral. And like that's a thing that like with this film that like watching this much, I mean, the movie's 2 hours and 12 minutes. This like high pitched level of like violence for about an hour, 40 minutes. Cause like maybe the first 20, half an hour doesn't have it. And then it's like pretty straight throughout with like a couple of like breathing motions. It's just so violent and it's so intense, right? And then one of the things that they start doing, and we could talk about this, which I think is really interesting, is the nature of other cops in comparison to McClane. because one of the things he starts doing, and Jay mentioned, is that he starts trying to get help. He like realizes like, I'm in a fucking building with a bunch of terrorists who are also really good. And that's the one of the thing that he acknowledges, like when he talks to Powell the first time, that like they're really slick, they know what the fuck that they're doing. Like these guys are like, as Ellis says, they're happening, like they know what they're doing, right? Oh man, the Ellis scene is the best. His scenes with Hans are like my favorite thing in history, dude. It's so good, right? But he tries to basically like through fits and starts until he gets Powell, to basically, realize through a dead body coming out of a window, that like they're not to get them to come. So he first tries with like a fire alarm, right? To get them to come, and like the fire trucks come, and he sees it in the shot from like the roof, and right, and then this is when Hans begins to get a little, they get aware because they see the fire alarm happening, and you begin to see like the like dimensions of the building, what they've taken over, right? But then they're able to kind of call it back, right? And then this is where McClane gets his like first like interaction, and he basically just starts fighting in these like grudge matches. I mean, like they're not fights, they're all out grudge matches of like brute force and profanity. That's all it is. Like every time he punches one of them, he basically, I'm gonna break your fucking neck, and like it's just so vulgar. I'm like watching this movie, like, damn. But it's like it allows, I think, an audience member who like I think of someone like my dad, right, who would never go out and just get into a fist fight on the street. But when he has that itch that needs to be scratched of wanting to like fist fight on the street and like curse somebody out, he puts on Die Hard. You know what I'm saying? Like you get to watch McClane, because like the first guy he takes out is big ass Carl's brother, right? I forget what his name is, right? And the guy's big. Like they shoot him from a low angle. They really like, even though he has like a sweatshirt on, you can see he's muscular too, right? And like he gets into this grudge match with him with like machine guns, and they're like shooting, like they're hitting stuff, and they tumble down a stairs, and he like breaks his neck. And I'm like, oh, this is just like weird transference for dudes, right? Who like, they want to break somebody's neck, and they get to watch Die Hard and just go, yeah, right? I mean, it's so brutal, right? And it's so much Fritz, right?
Fritz is his name.
Fritz. I mean, also the names, right? Like Hans, Fritz, Carl. Like they're just like, they're not even creative, right? The head of Nakatomi is Ozu, which is like, Ozu is the great Japanese filmmaker. Like they're just not creative in any way with these names. They're just really, we're just gonna throw some names out there and use them. They're very typical and known. But yeah, so like, he's getting into these fights, and I might be skipping over some things, we can go back, but then like he then goes and tries to radio the cops on the roof, right? Again, right? With this lady, and the lady, and it's always a woman. Why is it always a lady? Like, why is it always like a dumb and like a young woman? It's either a young woman or like an old lady. No, I think it's almost always a young woman, right? And they give her this like, sorry, sir, you need to call 911, right? They always make it like she's like the ball buster, right? Because she's not just like, stopping a terrorist act. It's like this very sensible man is telling this woman what's happening, and she just doesn't get it, right?
She's gonna call the FCC and report him to the FCC, and he's like, "Good, send him down here.
Send him down here."
I mean, that's true. I do think there's probably some truth to the gender. Like, I think those operator roles like were very heavily gendered, and like almost everyone who worked in them was women. Which is just like, yeah. There was probably some reason for it, actually, like a cycle, like whatever, like
that's a good point.
Men want to hear from a woman, whether it's
Yeah.
good or bad news, as opposed to like another guy, like, I don't know.
Yeah.
It's probably some like very patriarchal thing, probably.
100%. I was really put him in that position, but like it's also just so convenient for the movie. The idiot young woman is going to be the person who's just not going to get it, right? And it's just like these constant ways that he's like getting in these fits and starts of like police incompetence, right? Which like turns up once the police get there, and then the last one is when we get Reginald Vell Johnson's character, Powell. The woman basically is like, send a black and white, to go and see it. And then you get Reginald Vell Johnson, Carl Winslow, right? He rolls in. The first thing you see him is buying some Twinkies, in a store, right? It's kind of like a 7-Eleven. It might be a 7-Eleven.
It's a AM PM, which is definitely
PM.
what we had those in the West Coast.
I remember
sure.
those.
Yeah.
I do remember those when I would go visit my cousins out west. Yeah, the AM PM. So you wouldn't got that, and he's in there, and like it definitely is poking on the like the joyriding, donut or Twinkie eating, slightly overweight cop, who's like rolling through, and he's kind of joyriding, and there's a way that at first you're also to position that he's probably not going to be as smart as like or be unintelligent as like the rest of them, but then they show you why he's like that, and we'll definitely get to why Powell is in the position that he is, his psychological trauma, right? That Powell has. But he joyrides through Nakatomi, and he go ahead.
Before that, he's looking at the building, and there are machine guns going off on the roof. And I just have to say that anyone who has ever been around gunfire of any kind, but particularly automatic weapons or semi-automatic weapons, like, there is no fucking way. I don't care that it's 50 floors up, like, that he wouldn't hear that shit.
This is also a good point. And you know what? If any of our LA folks are watching this, I've been in downtown LA. Downtown LA, that time of night is very desolate. So I feel like if there was a lot of gunfire happening, you would hear it. Like, you would hear it. Like, I've been in downtown LA at like 8 o'clock at night, and I'm sorry. It's like there's no one there, especially in 88.
You can hear gunfire from like miles away. Like you would hear it. Absolutely. Especially at night, like you're saying. And there's other, like, there's the whole question of whether they would hear it because they're shooting them off while he's in the building too. I mean, I guess you could make the argument that like this is a really special soundproof building or something, but like he's looking at it from a few blocks away and they're on the roof shooting and he doesn't hear it. Like it.
Also, like, why would
that along with the shoes really bothered me.
Also, LA's the land of helicopters, man. It's the ghetto bird area. Like, just send could you leave South Central for a moment and roll over to the Century City and go see what's happening on up there, right? Like, a lot of it is just nonsensical, and you're kind of like, this is annoying, right? So Powell gets there, right? And this is where the movie, I feel like even like the shift of the violence just goes up to me. Cause like, even like the way they use violence and comedy at the same time is just really like, it's demented to me. Like this, like, I don't know. I always have these fantasies of like someone who has never seen American culture, and then you show them something like Die Hard is like the first thing about American culture that they would watch, and they would go, "Are y'all crazy? Are y'all weird?" Because the sequence that happens is, the McClane, they find him in the thing, and he gets into this like gunfight under the table with the dude, and the dude rolls and he shoots him under the table, right? So Powell's about to leave, right? So McClane's like, I gotta get this dude. So he's like busting open the window. That's kind of how he got caught the first time. So you see the body of the dude that McClane just killed like fall onto the car, which then goes into these like chaotic shots of like Powell like driving back and he's shooting at him through the glass, and it's like, and then there's the shot. The best shot though is the shot of Argyle missing the whole thing on the phone listening to Stevie Wonder. It's so fucking it's funny, but like it's so demented. Which then like it's Carl, I'm not Carl Winslow or Powell, to basically crash into like the ditch, right? Which is like, the movies, it's set off now. Like basically, and what does he say? Welcome to the party, pal, right? Like the very famous line actually that shot of him out of the window. But it's just so insane. Like I'm watching the film and I'm like, this is like the hyper violence mixed with comedy as a kind of adrenaline rush, but also like release. It's like this is what American culture has come to. Like this is where like I don't know, they would call me conservative or something like that in that kind of way, where I just get very like I'm like this is a lot, y'all. Like I'm watching and I'm just like I was sitting there with my partner. And she was just like, because she's seen it before, but she doesn't watch it often, and she was just like, "Oh, this is a lot," like this is just too much.
It is, yeah. And I mean, it's also like a whole, I think about things like John Wick movies and stuff like this, right? Like it becomes a whole thing in this kind of genre, these genres of film that sort of come out of this era to just like, okay, like how many, like what can we do in terms, like how can we up the bullet count, up the body count, like how high can we get it? I mean, it's actually made fun of in one of, I don't know if it's the first one or the second one, the Hot Shots movies. Like they have the whole scene where they're, doing the thing of Rambo, and they actually have
Yeah.
like the counter up and like we set the record for the most people killed in a film, right? Like it has that kind of edge to it. I mean, obviously this film, there aren't that many people, so it's more just like the pressure, the violence of the fighting. I mean, I think that this serves a couple of roles, and I think it's interesting because like you said, like what do people think in other parts of the world? I mean, one, yeah, I do think that they think that we're crazy. But what's interesting always is that, America's society obviously is like one of the most violent in the world on a kind of per capita basis, right? And people will say, well, why is that? Because everybody watches our movies, right? So they'll use that as the argument that like you can't say it's just the movies, right? Because they're watching this shit other places too. But when you watch it another place, you're like, oh, those are those crazy Americans, right? You're not watching it as a representation of your own society and of like your own like heroes, right? Of what heroism is within your culture, right? Which is what this is. I mean, John McClane is supposed to be this American hero, right? And so then, I mean, obviously there's like the propaganda side of just like the um the whole narrative and acceptance of like brute force and violence as necessary to the job of actually doing policing, right? Because this is what you're up against, right? um but then actually I lost the other one, but that is one of the main things aside from like this, I think, cultural meaning making around Americans, which, as you said, like it is demented, like it is actually disturbed, like being an empire, and being a settler colonial country and having this legacy of slavery, like all of these things require, violence workers, right? And so you have to have films to sort of cater to that reality and the necessity of lifting those people up as really important and fundamental to the maintenance of the society as well.
Yeah, because then the other thing, and this kind of goes back to I think an additional comment that I wanted to make about like the woman on the phone and how they take it to like even like the deputy chief is this idea that like the thing that's also keeping like our civilizational stability away is like our bureaucracies, because it has this very like libertarian kind of like bureaucracy issue critique too, like oh, I can't get these terrorists, terrorism issues solved because I got to go through a phone operator who's following the rules, right? Or I'll get to the deputy chief. He has a certain kind of bureaucratic way and very stupid kind of way of dealing with something. So because of that, we need. And it's the same thing with the Martin Riggs thing. We need the improviser. This one is like the street smart guy because you have no really evidence. I mean, one of the things that my partner also, she was like, wait a minute. She was like, how does he know how to use all these guns? Was he in the military? And I said, that's a damn good question. And you don't know where McClane is, but like the assumption that they want you to make is that he's just so street smart. It's almost like innate. He's like this special human. Like he basically can figure out C4 detonators, machine guns of any kind, how to get through the shafts of a building, just because he's been a cop on the New York City streets, and he's just adapted to like terror because also what's in people's brains that New York is a war zone itself, right? So he's basically war zone adapted, right? It's such a strange libertarian fantasy of like who the heroes are going to be, but then you also get to see why Bruce Willis really worked for this film because he can really give off. I mean, he said he leaned into. I think he's from Hoboken. I think is where he grew up. He said he leaned into to kind of his Jersey working class upbringing. He said for the character, he said he really poured it into there, right? So I also just find it interesting that like the pro-proletariat working class imagery that we're going to be able to get has to come through a cop. Like it has to come through John McClane, the cop, right? And then Powell even too. I think he's also giving off that energy, right? Like these working men, right? Family men, right? They have morals, but Powell shoots kids with toy guns. We'll get into that in a minute.
Well, we have to. Now you've said it, so we have to get into it.
I know. I mean, we haven't gotten there just yet, but like probably move on. But like, it's like it's a big part of it. But yeah, it's just all very funky. I don't know what we can. Maybe there's a few things we can maybe keep going with like the other cop parts, and then we can get to that.
Yeah, I mean, I guess for me, so not too long after that. I mean, so one like early on, I don't think we've said this yet, but Hans Gruber, when he finally gets to, because they're walking with, so yeah, Carl Winslow and Bruce Willis, they're on the walkie-talkies together, they're on CB radios together, and yeah, there's the whole Roy Rogers, like the whole cowboy thing.
Yippee-ki-yay.
I can't remember. Yeah, exactly. Right, that's right. And so there's that back and forth. So they all kind of, because the terrorists are also on the same CB line, which like I do have to say, like, why didn't they just use a separate channel? Like,
so that's never made sense to me, and I've always just took it that I just don't understand it. But I actually think I also think that's bad movie making, and when it gets that convoluted, I think that's also just bad storytelling. But yeah, like I always had the same experience.
I mean, I understand why they would want to monitor, like why the terror, like I could understand sort of switching back and forth or something. I mean, and I get logistically why it's difficult. It just is. It just makes it very funky because they're all on the same CB, and anybody who's ever operated a CB, if you haven't, CBs have multiple channels on them, so you could be like switch over to channel 9, right? And then you're talking on your own channel. Now, obviously, if McClane says that to Winslow's character, then I'm just gonna keep calling him Carl Winslow. I'm sorry, but then they would hear it, so they might want to transfer over to hear what they're talking about. Like I do get that, but them all just sitting pat on one channel is funny to me. So there's discussion between all of them on this open channel, basically, and like you get the demands. Like I'm trying to think of the sequence of this a little bit. I may have it a little bit off, but we can jump around if we need to. But the demand. Yeah, so the demands are for the release of, but that's not until the FBI gets there, right? So yeah, go ahead.
No, it's when we can bring him in now. It's when the deputy chief comes in.
Okay, yeah.
So then like the deputy, so Winslow's been there. You get the cops coming in, like there's like shot of all the cars coming into downtown Nakatomi. You also get the media. We have to bring in the media at some point, and how the media is portrayed in this movie, which is like, typical. Um, and I'm not saying negatively. I mean, it is good that it's a negative portrayal, but it's part of that like general cynicism about everything that they like to have. So I also find the deputy chief's name hilarious is Dwayne Johnson, and it's a white dude. I'm sorry, for me that's always been hilarious. That is Dwayne Johnson, and it's played by Paul Gleason. And Paul Gleason is always playing like the bureaucratic jackass. Like, we will remember him from the Breakfast Club, right? Like, he's the dude in the Breakfast Club who, was it cracking skulls, right? That is his job. So he's the deputy chief, and he comes in like a limo, right? The limo kind of like goes up, right? Or like a sedan, or like some kind of, is it a limo? No, it's not a limo. It's a like an Oldsmobile type car, right? An more official car, right? He gets out the back of the car, right? And he goes right to Powell. And you immediately find out that like this guy is like a real bureaucrat jackass. He doesn't go to Powell and be like, "You okay, man? How you feeling? Do you need to go home? Have you seen?" He just starts railing into him, asking him questions. Powell's trying to give him his assessment, which, like, we have the foreknowledge of knowing that Powell's guesses are correct, right? That he thinks he's a cop and that he can do this, but like Johnson's like totally dismissive of it. He's like, "What are you talking about? He's a fucking da da da." But like, to be perfectly honest, even though he's an asshole, they are sometimes reasonable
Yeah, you
considerations,
don't.
in my opinion.
He had totally like he doesn't know who the guy is. Like he's like he thinks it. He's like he thinks he's a cop because he talked about like an ID, like being able to
ID,
scope a fake ID. Like
right?
yeah,
Right. So like we do have the vantage point of knowing that Powell is right, but it also is like reasonable. But the way they put it, the guy's just a total like just like strong arming idiot. And it's just like furthering this moment that like the cops outside of like maybe like the singular rank and file people like a Powell are basically useless. Like you watching this, like the whole police department system, it is a kind of a useless, bureaucratic. And then eventually you see when basically he calls in like, which I'm guessing is like the SWAT team to basically take out the terrorists that infiltrate the building. They basically get their ass kicked, right? And like tactically, like when they're like shooting at the lights, and like the only person who knows what it is, like they're shooting at us, and he goes, "They're shooting at the lights," right? And that like it takes one light getting shot out for Johnson to realize they've been shooting at the lights, and it's fucking funny because the guy Paul Gleason, to his credit, he played these roles really well. He's like, "The shooting at the lights." Like, he's really good at playing an idiot, right? But it is part of and it's a general theme in the 80s that they really got into, that our bureaucracies are essentially in our way. We've like created a kind of bureaucratic system where we have people in principled places that don't know how to do their job well. But like we've talked about this, it's all a slick way to justify a fucking, overzealous, um, breaking the law, hyper violent cop. Right? It's the McClane, it's the Riggs thing. I mean, this is where Riggs and McClane, in my view, kind of fill the same void when it comes to propaganda. Right?
yeah, I agree, and it's also like it's an interesting moment because obviously neoliberalism is on its ascendancy in this period, right? So there is a way in which like cutting all the bureaucracies, and this is just like this is part of the line of you know both especially conservative in this period, but increasingly also like Democratic Party discourse and whatnot. um but it's interesting because I always was sort of taught by folks within the abolitionist sphere and stuff like that that never really applied to police, right? That they never really took that. But it's interesting because there were these moments when you got what people would call like the blue flu, right? Or like police basically going on strike, right? Because of attempts to like, cut their budgets or whatever else, right? And so I actually think it's a little bit too simple to say that it never involved cops to any degree, but I think it's that they, like, cops were better organized, and they also were more effective in terms of calling kind of the bluff of capital of like, hey, you need us, actually, like we serve your interests, and so don't fuck around and forget it, basically. But it's funny in the films because it's sort of like, you know I don't know. I guess it, like you said, it just sort of fits in. I mean, the critiques of the FBI are heavy, not heavy, but just like, because they're not deep, but it's obviously very critical towards the FBI. Um, and also, the LAPD in general looks pretty bad here, which is an interesting thing.
Right. But it's not bad in a way that I think, and I think is what you're saying is like it's not bad in a way that's sufficient to like, any kind of real radical read about that would
Right,
explain what would happen with Rodney King in a couple of years. Right.
right.
It's bad in this, like, there was a cynicism in the late 80s by this point that like, yeah, America's a good society. We just have a lot of idiots running it. Like, I mean, and you heard a lot of 90s, right? We just need smarter people running, right? This is like a big thing you hear liberals say all the fucking time, that like it's not our system, it's not our society. We have too many dummies in office, or too many dummies, running the police departments, or too many dummies in business.
Yeah. It's also this whole, I think, probably cynicism, not cynicism. It's really an assault by the right against the public sector too, just broadly, to just sort of, eh, because it's like, if police are like this, like, what do they think about teachers unions or whatever it's yeah. Anyway, we can keep going.
Thank you, Stephen. Dwayne Robinson. That's
Oh.
even more black. Like, I'm sorry.
Well,
Right, because
Dwayne Johnson is The Rock.
exactly. That's why I had that head in my head. But Dwayne Robinson, I'm like, what this? I was like, wait a minute. Why is there a white dude named Dwayne Robinson? It's so weird, right? It's always felt so strange to me. Yeah, the Johnsons are the FBI, which I also think is really funny. So I mean, the film is also weird because, like, yeah, like a lot of these action films, like you get these plot lines, and then you just get like just violence, right? You have like the big sequence where, and and also, and then with this movie is violence and the funny, right? Like you get Theo narrating the cops coming in. Oh, they have themselves an RV, and like you get to like watch Theo, and I'm watching it. I'm like, oh, I actually like Theo's like one of my favorite characters in this movie. Like, they do this thing to endear you to the villains, right? Like they're brutal, right? But there is this way that you kind of like get into them. Like if you're kind of into rooting for the villain, this is one of those movies where you really can, because they're witty. Them actually not having a political read, I actually think like actually helps you want to identify with them. They can just be greedy and like a bit, unprincipled, and you can just kind of not excuse it, but you can like have that kind of cathartic role play as you watch the movie, right? So yeah, he narrates that, he beats the thing, and then like this is the other thing with the movie, like that sequence is so much fucking like bullets, and then like when you think the scene is just gonna kind of die out, you have Bruce Willis take a computer, take these C4 sticks, and then literally throw it down an elevator shaft, and there's an explosion that just destroys a building. And I was like, man, my heart rate, this is a lot. I was like, why? I'm like, this is like American entertainment. Like, I'm serious. It's like one of those moments where I had to step back a few times and just go, this shit is a lot. And like, what is this like, doing to this your brain, or satisfying in your brain in terms of your own anxieties about what could happen in society? Think about, we're still in Cold War era, where we're still in definitely nuclear clock is still running around. You know, like it's a lot.
Yeah. No, it is. I mean, this film comes out 3 years after the move bombing, right? So
Ah.
the thing that I think about when I watch that scene as well as the helicopter and the roof, um, is that, like, if you study the move bombing stuff, like, part of what so it is C4, and it is a satchel bomb, which that one is, although, yeah, he wraps the monitor or whatever onto it as well to make sure that it really, goes down. I mean, there's like again, the need to suspend logical disbelief or whatever, because, of course, you're like, you're dropping a bunch of C4 down an elevator and you're 30 floors up. Like, what do you think is going to happen to you in this? And why isn't the building on fire after it and all this kind of stuff, right? Um, but then, yeah, I mean, it's like that was so close within cultural memory that that kind of like satchel C4 bomb being dropped by law enforcement would have been within 3 years. And then when they do the helicopter, which is at the end, and the FBI brings that in, there's that they dropped it from a helicopter in the move bombing, and it ostensibly the argument was that they were going to blow the roof off of it, basically. So it's a similar. I mean, in this case, it's the terrorists that are going to blow the roof off in order to like blow up the helicopters and kill a bunch of the hostages, I guess, or whatever. Like, because they want people to think that they died in it, right? So there's like this whole thing of them believing that in order to get away with 600 million or whatever it is, that they have to actually that people have to think that they die too. But yeah, when I think about that, like the C4, the explosions, blowing up the roof, helicopters being involved, all of that, like there's all of these elements, and sure, they're rearranged from the actual story. But again, like if you think about it in the context of the film, like all of that is justified. I mean, the only thing that's not justified is blowing the roof off because the terrorists actually do that. But, like nobody,
But who
like
are the
there is a,
ultimate but who are the ultimate victims in it? The FBI, who's unprincipled.
right,
So basically,
right.
jokes on you motherfuckers who had no principle.
Yeah. And they say, like, well, I guess we got to get some new FBI guys or whatever. They make a joke about it as well.
Right.
Um, yeah. So I do think that that's a huge, like,
Yeah.
I don't know how many. I mean, I know people in that era definitely knew about the move bombing, but I don't remember personally growing up in that era. Like my wife grew up in Philly, so she does remember like very clearly. But if you didn't grow up in Philly, I don't think it was like as much on most people's radar until later on, until you like
No,
learn
I didn't
about
learn I
Mamiya and
didn't
learn about
learn
Move and
about
all
it
that.
until I was a teenager. Because
Yeah,
I
me
have
too.
family in Philly as well, and they were kind of involved in some of the politics, like, supporting them. And it wasn't until I went, I think one like maybe like Thanksgiving or something, and they were talking about it or something like that, that I found out about it. But no, even from New York,
Yeah, and
I
that
because my
like so
parents knew about it.
they also in that siege, which was the second siege on a move house, actually, the first one was in 78, but they also had, like, those, like, kinda tank, like, armored personnel carrier type vehicles, which is, like, what they use, of course, in the movie to try to go into the house, and I think, like, narratively within the movie, it's like, hey, your armored personnel carrier is not going to matter at all when you come up against some real terrorists. Like what you really need is a bunch of C4 to drop on the building. Like it has, it has its own kind of justifications of that level of, violence, and just the need for police to have all of these tools and weapons, right? Because,
Right. Yeah.
nothing is ever enough.
Right. And then in the context of this movie, because there are a group of foreign terrorists who are able to smuggle in rocket launchers. Hey, what do you need? So you have that sequence, right? And then you get to which is honestly one of my favorite sequences in the movie is Ellis. Is like Ellis's his want to basically broker a deal with the terrorists, right? And it, it's funny, like you watch it because I know what they're trying to do. It's like these are like Hollywood guys. I'm sure they've met all of them their fair share of that coked up junior executive who tried to get them to do some shit. They found them annoying as hell, and they were like, "Yeah, let's make a character like that and have him get shot in the head." Right? Like you could totally tell it's like they're playing on like a trope that they've seen, but like it's so funny because you have these characters. I mean, Wall Street is 2 years before that, right? So you have the Gordon Gekko image is definitely big in the kind of popular imagination. And I think there's also a real disdain for like the corporate asshole in like public imagination. So seeing him get like a public execution is like something that I think audiences really craved. And I think that's a way that people honestly end up rooting for Hans. I can't lie because he executes this corporate asshole, right? Like I remember like watching it with my dad and my dad being like, "This guy's such a jackass," right? Like, and you're watching him. I mean, his lines are just absolutely, like. So, well, I've watched 60 Minutes, and I'm saying to myself, they're motivated, they're happening. He calls him Booby. These names, right? Like, I mean, the guy plays it so well. He thinks he's smarter than them too, right? When he says to Holly that he's going to go in there, he's like, dude, I think he says something like a fake, like he tries to make like a fake German word up, right, or something to like ask the guy something. It's like not even really a word, It's like so, but like it's this weird thing that Hollywood does with violence is that like they're able to position people that I don't like corporate assholes at all, but like they're able to like get me on the side of violence by watching him get like a public execution on screen. And it's really, really manipulative, which is what they're doing. Because every time I watch it, I go, I'm like, yep, there you got it, Ellis. And I'm like, oh my God, no, you got to be rooting for someone getting shot in the head. Stop, man. These fucking movies, man. This is like so bad, right? But this is what they do. Like they take a kernel of like your like disgust and get you to like root for someone getting shot. And it's so bad. And not like, it's not like in a war or revolution. It's like because he got shot because the guy couldn't get a deal. Right.
Yeah, it also, I mean, it reminds me of Trump too, honestly, like the whole art of a deal, like
Yeah.
bullshit, like, yeah, but yeah, no, I mean, he's, yeah,
But it's so funny. I mean, like that scene is just so well done. I mean, like it's just so funny, right? Even how Alan Rickman plays it, like, oh, like I don't know what you're talking about, and like the eye lines, Carl, because the other thing we didn't talk about the names of the groups that he asked to be freed.
yeah, they're all like, yeah, I didn't write them down. Did you?
No, I didn't. I mean, it's
Yeah.
like Sri Lanka, a Sri Lankan group. They
Well,
do
there's, yeah,
a group from Quebec,
right, and
um,
Northern Ireland. Yeah,
and
I mean,
Northern Ireland.
they're all not real
They're
groups,
not
but
real, right?
like,
Yeah,
but they are, close, like kind of analogs to other things that were going on at the time.
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's, I can't remember what they use, some weird terms, but yeah, it's like supposed to be like
And Dawn
Quebec
is one.
nationalists,
Yeah,
you know, um, basically like an IRA type group, and then one that might stand in for the Tamil Tigers, or whatever. But
yeah,
yeah, Asian Dawn, that's right. That's what they use
yeah,
for one of them. But yeah, and then he has the line, right, of like, yeah, I read about him in Time magazine, right?
yeah.
To,
Right. And it's like to add to like it's like maybe there are those people out there, but like the people who really are happening, like Ellis likes to say, they're not here, right? The people who are happening wants to basically steal capital, right? You know, and I think it also begs to say that like attaching Holly to this, like new capital, it like gets people who are like on the social rise to basically join the capital force, right? Well, look, these people just want to steal from me too. You know, I'm on the rise, right? Big business is actually better for me, it's better for progress. These people are anti-progress because they want to steal it for themselves. I mean, it's just it's the trick.
I did laugh too when Ellis is going through like the lists of people that he thinks maybe, Hans has issues with. And he says, maybe it's the Hebes.
Yes, like what? What? This dude. I mean, he says like another word that a sea, the sea with camels. I was like, what the fuck? This dude is just like you're just watching. You're like they really went full fledged on the corporate asshole here. Oh man, they're happening. It's so
Oh,
funny.
man.
I mean, it's played so. um I mean, I think the last couple of things, I mean, there's other things, but like one of the things we haven't talked about, we haven't talked about the feds. We Powell, we can talk about Powell in his revelation. Because that's like another thing. I mean, I don't know if you want to jump in. You can start it maybe, Jay, about Powell's revelation that we all find out.
I mean, it's in a scene. So, like, it comes after Bruce Willis. His feet are all cut up with glass because there's a scene where they figure out, shoot the glass. That they just have to, litter the floor with glass because he doesn't have shoes on. So the whole movie, he's trying to get shoes off of people he kills and all this stuff, and he can't find anyone who is his shoe size. Um, yeah, and so he's picking the glass out in the bathroom, and it's the vulnerable scene. It's also the scene, I think, or it's at least like part of it, because I think it goes back and forth to other things, but that Bruce does his like, confessional to his wife or whatever. Um it's really like kind of like the soldiers who are in the trench together, right? And he's like, "Oh, I need to tell you what to tell my wife if I die," kind of thing. Um But yeah, he does this thing where he's kind of actually talking shit about Carl Winslow a little bit, because he says that he's kind of, I can't remember the exact line, but it's something along the lines of, you um why are you on a desk job, right? And Carl Winslow says, this is because what, you don't think that that's noble police work or something like that? um and yeah, I mean, the thing about it obviously is that he just reveals, like, no, I shot a kid, and he was 13 years old and he had a ray gun, and but it was dark and I couldn't tell the difference. And obviously it's such a disgusting scene. I mean, and I don't remember it that way as a kid. Be curious when Mtume hops back on his thoughts on that too. um I don't remember it that way as a kid, but obviously in hindsight, right, it's the Tamir Rice, kind of story, like, just projected out of, I mean, he doesn't say that it's a black kid, but he just say, I shot a kid, he was 13. And he had a ray gun and it was dark, which is just like, I mean, it's insane, it's like yeah, but then what happens in the film, right, is that you are made to feel sorry for him, right? That like this has, because he's such a good man, he couldn't go back out and raise his weapon again, which is, I think, is what he said. I could never raise my weapon again, knowing that I could possibly. So he's just distraught and torn up by this. He doesn't leave the profession. He becomes, a desk cop, basically, paper pusher, and but yeah, and so then of course I mean, we'll get to the end, right, which is very important for his arc, right? Um, but yeah, as somebody said in the chat, this is why he had to relocate to Chicago and harass Steve Urkel for the 90s.
Yeah, honestly, like that. So when I was a kid, I was totally made to empathize for the cop. Like, it's like the immediate assumption you make and the way the sequence is truncated, it would make you to believe that the kid would do something that would make the cop have to shoot him, right? Because if this nice jolly guy who's like being so good to John McClane, who seems like such an angel, would shoot, um my thought process as a kid, maybe even as an early teenager, is that the kid did something like threatening, that basically it was unmistakable. But then, of course, as I gotten older and I watched the movie, my thought is like, I mean, it's kind of obvious where it's just like, okay, you did not hear a gunshot. Why are you shooting? Why is your gun open? Why, huh? Like, there's so no context for it that even in the context that they give it, it just is like, well, then this guy is he kills civilians because he is a shitty human, right? Like, and but the kind of what you when we talk about the ending, the fact that it's used as this like crutch or this like trauma that he has to overcome in order to kind of find his manliness again, because like the way the final shot is done, it's so violent and like phallic, like it's so like brute force. I mean, it's almost like Magnum force. It's very Dirty Harry, right? And it's funny when we get to, we could talk about it. Even the music he uses, that's kind of hilarious. What track it's from, right? Like it's it's all used to kind of like about this like arrival, right, of like his maleness. He lost it by killing a kid by on accident, right? And he gets it back because he has to defend this family of this white dude and his wife who might get shot by some Euro terrorists. It's really, I mean, it's demented thinking. It's like it's truly demented thinking, and but it also kind of shows you where they think about where cops do have the life priority over civilians, right? Like that's a mistake. I mean, you've heard right wingers say that, right? We need to have guns, and if every now and then there's a person who gets killed, it's okay because of the overall good it happens. If there's an innocent person who dies, well, it's a trade-off. It's breakage, as the FBI calls it, which is another wild sequence, right? With the FBI, you know.
Yeah, we should probably talk about them because they're in
Yeah,
the film at this point, and
yeah,
they're these two officers, both named Johnson. I mean, again, like you said, like the thing about this movie is it is funny. I mean, this is why a movie like this has the kind of staying power I think that
yeah.
it does, right? Is like that it's not just like it is all the brute force, all the violence, all of that. So it gets that like action movie crowd all into it. Somebody else referenced the fact that it's a vertical action movie, which is an
100%.
interesting, innovation in terms of like, okay, let's put it all in this one building and like, do all that. Um, but yeah, I mean, there's the comedic elements of it. There is the kind of they managed to get you invested in Carl Winslow's story and his redemption arc. There's the relationship that you want to see. And so, I mean, you know, it kind of reminds me of Speed. Like Speed is a good kind of like
Mhm.
following in the lineage of a movie like Die Hard. I mean, obviously there's other Die Hard movies, but where you have like a lot of different things within it that can kind of pull you into it.
Mhm.
even if you just are not somebody who's like super into action, like it's like there's a big difference between this, I guess what I'm saying, and like, you know, Arnold Schwarzenegger movies or Van Damme movies, in my opinion, or
It's the
you
high
know,
concept, right? I think they rely on the idea of like the high concept and like and the characters, the peripheral characters, the character actors. I mean, that's the thing. Is like so like the two Johnsons. So like the what's his name? Who's in the Goonies? I always forget his name. He's the White Johnson, right? He's always like a classic guy you have in your movie for like 20 to 30 minutes of screen time. I mean, he's in it longer in the Goonies, but he's always good at these kind of like weird Davi, right? Right. Yeah.
Robert Davi. Yeah.
Robert Davi, right? He plays these characters well. Like he's a total. I mean, that sequence. He's in the helicopter. It's like it's like Saigon, right? And like you just, it's what you kind of imagine these guys are like. He's like, I was in junior high, dickhead, right? But like, it's the thing. It's like what it is, because like you're like, okay, so the FBI, for people who don't quite know, the FBI in the film come in to take over from the cops, which is like a trope they always use in movies. So basically, the movies start, you know, the cops prove that they can't get shit done. So there's always a takeover of like a higher thing. And it's a comment, I think, on bureaucracy as well, right? The FBI takes over. So the FBI will then come in, right? So you're the agent, the two Agent Johnsons, right? One's a little older, the other one's younger, right? The first thing they do is something that Hans once done, which also shows that Hans is smarter than everybody, is that they shut off all the power. Which is another side thing I want to get to is like, why do all the people who work like the municipal services sound like they're from New York and the East Coast? This is LA. Hey, what down here at Nakatomi? You're like, this is like, why do they sound like they're from New York City, right? But Hans needs them to shut down the electricity so the vault can open after Theo has basically gone through each of the I think it's six locks, and it's like a seventh that can only be done by the electric braking, right? And he knows that the FBI will do this, you know. And then Hans, I mean, it's like this Hans has those great, like, I give you the FBI. Like he's constantly showing that your bureaucratic system is dumb, it can be debunked, right? And everything, right? It can be totally like figured out. You're all stupid. So the FBI's whole thing is like, you have the hostages up there, right? And then we're gonna come out. We tell Hans we're gonna basically like airlift them out, right? And then at the same token, we'll let you, you know, all your comrades out. The FBI is like, nah, we're not gonna do that, right? We're actually gonna basically, when we see the terrorists up top, we're basically gonna like take them out because we're gonna have gunships. And they say it like they're not expecting gunships. We're basically gonna roll up in there and kill them. They also don't know that Hans has basically double crossed them, that he's actually gonna send the hostages up there. They're not going to go up there. And when they get to the top, that's why they have the C4 already. They're going to blow up the roof, and then everyone will be dead, and they'll think Hans is dead. And he says, you know, when they all figure it out, we'll be sitting on a beach, was it collecting 20% or something like that, right? So, but when the helicopter sequences of like the FBI rolling up in there, I mean, these dudes, like, they're like yelling, like, he's like, ah, like, and like, they're so absolutely like bloodthirsty that it's like, it's the Hawk thing. I mean, it's the thing you kind of see in To Live and Die in LA, which is really what that movie's all about, is like this idea that at a certain level of law enforcement, you just basically go into like a red position of just like, I'll even kill innocent people to basically get what I say. Because they asked him, he says, well, what's the breakage? And he says 20 to 25%. I can live with that. And as a kid, I never really paid attention to it. It wasn't until I got older, I was like, yo, this shit is fucked up. Like, the FBI's like, this is fucked up, right? But what happens? The FBI bites it. They get got, right, by Hans, and you end up getting me like, well, like, good for y'all. Y'all were going to kill everybody anyway. And of course, who's the one who saves them? McClane, right? McClane's the one.
He saves the
hostages.
Right.
Right? He's the one who saves the hostage. Sorry, he's the one who saves the hostages because he realizes it's a double cross because that's when he sees Hans on the roof. He's like, that's why he's on the roof. And he basically gets everybody down. And then who tries to shoot him?
The FBI trying to shoot him. Yeah. He's like, I'm on your side, you motherfuckers. Like,
but I'm like, but how would they know? I'm like, also, like, how would they know? It's like,
right. He's on the roof with no shoes on, with like an AK, like shooting it. Like
it makes no sense, right? Then you have the famous, thing of him jumping off the roof when it falls with the, I mean, like the stunts in this movie. Which is also like, I don't want to go too deep. If you would want to read about this, is also a film that they had to redo how they did stunts because of what happened on Poltergeist. Like it was like a lot of stunt fear because of the stunt deaths. So they basically like did this like because it was so many heavy stunts, they had to like redo the entire kind of philosophy with like the stunts on this movie.
Yeah, he lost. There's a. I have to look at which one it is. But this film is responsible for Bruce Willis losing hearing in an ear, basically.
Right.
Also,
Right.
Wild.
Right. I mean, I think the last bunch of stuff, I mean, we haven't touched the media, and then we pretty much have the ending of the movie. The kind of ending sequences of the movie. I mean, the other thing with the media is just that like they're opportunistic and like absolutely, also stupid. You have the really opportunistic lead reporter guy who basically, doxes the McClanes, gets them on TV. He's the one who basically lets Hans realize that they're married.
Threatens their maid, which I do have to say this too,
we got to bring the maid in.
I forgot to bring this up too, because this is the other thing about the kind of imperial feminism shit, right? Is it's like the white woman gets to be this corporate like VP or whatever she is, right? Like a high up corporate job. Well, and then she moves to LA. Bruce Willis stays in New York to be a cop, right? And so she has a full-time like live-in domestic worker, basically. They don't say where she's from, but Mexican, Latin America, somewhere is what's implied, obviously. And so he threatens to deport her. The media guy says, I'll call INS if you don't let me in to interview the kids, right? Which is like such a fucking scumbag move. And obviously they're showing it as a scumbag move. Like you're supposed to think of this reporter as a total scumbag. But yeah.
But then but it also works on like double levels, because then like you have this like illegal immigrant, and this is what the corporate people do is they go out and they hire, like I could see a right winger who watches this movie, who enjoys it, who would, because like these movies also can't change people's perceptions, right? So like a reactionary who doesn't think women should work in the workforce can still look at Holly McClane as a ball buster, right? So like that'll be, and look what she's doing out there. She's up here hiring illegal immigrants. Like you could totally see that reactionary thing get like, but then also there's like the liberal feminism thing that happens early when she calls her and she's like, I already have it ready for you. And like, she's like, she's so like happy to be working for her. And what would I do without you? And I'm like, oh man, like I'm watching that shit. I go, this is like so disgusting. Like this is it's that bad shit that gives away the liberal feminism of the whole film. But that's what it is. That's what you did. Have to bring in the domestic worker, who's super happy with this white woman who treats her great and loves the kids more than she loves herself. It's so fucked up.
Yeah, and that is the vision of progress. Again, like we talked about Holly as like representing this sort of vision of progress within the film, right? Which again, I'm not saying progress in terms of I think this is actually progress, but this is like, again, that liberal feminist sort of view. Thank you for the the super chat. Appreciated very much. Um, so there's that. Let's see if there's. I mean, the other thing. One thing I want to say before we get to the end too. Obviously, this is like very. You get the yippee ki motherfucker, thing. That both he and Rickman, say as well. Um, but there is this whole thing of Rickman kind of, challenging him of like, you think you're a cowboy, right? And I know you have thoughts on this as well, but I do think that this is kind of the 80s is that era. The 70s and 80s really are like the period in which you see the traditional Western start to fade away. It doesn't completely go away. We get Lonesome Dove is 89, I think. Like um, you get other iterations. You get Unforgiven in 92, 94, something like that. Um, and then obviously nowadays we have, Yellowstone and all the spin-offs of this kind of stuff. So it's not that but it was a huge genre in American cinema for decades. Like it really had purchase, I think, as kind of the like really sort of before you get what we think of as action movies. Not that there weren't individual ones, but it kind of held that role, and obviously, I don't need to say the sort of settler colonial roots of that sort of film and all of that, right? Um, but this is a film in which McClane is clearly very much taking on that cowboy role, being sort of the instrumentality of justice and the law, but like, I mean, he is a police officer, but he's outside of his jurisdiction and he's not underneath the purview of like the LAPD can tell him stuff, but he doesn't actually have to listen to them, And so he is in this he is kind of a vigilante figure in this film, and that's supposed to give him license, I think, to be more outside of like procedure and like having to listen to chain of command and all of that kind of stuff. But I think all of that is important as well within this film.
No, but that's part of the trope. Beverly Hills Cop, right? He goes to Beverly Hills from Detroit, right? He does get chastised for breaking the rules, but in the film it's shown to be necessary. And one of the things is like his boss won't let him do it. One of those lines in Lethal Weapon is when after Murtaugh's daughter gets kidnapped. I can't remember the exact line, but Riggs says to him that we pretty much have to break from the rules here. He pretty much says to him in that scene in the house, right? After the phone, it's going to get bloody, right? And I do think that's the thing here. It's like, it's necessary for McClane to break from the structure because shit has just gotten so haywire. We need McClanes. And when they happen, we need to support them, right? And I think that's kind of, like, I think I one time saw like a comment on YouTube about just something to do with like BLA and like the Panthers, and some reactionary wrote a comment defending like the cops. Like they admitted that cops did excessive force against political movements, but their reasoning was that the political movements were so out of hand that that extra force was necessary, right? Like
Yeah.
we had to stomp it out. So like, yeah, maybe they did plant a few drugs on people, and maybe they did have false charges, and maybe they did slap a few people's faces and break a few jaws inside, the jail cell to get information. But it was necessary because this thing was going to destroy our culture.
Yeah, and I mean, there's a lot of people who think that way. Like it is, there's more people who think that way than I think a lot of people realize. You know, I mean, Israel is an entire society of people who think that way.
That part, right? Exactly. Like 100%, right? So And it's funny when you get to the cowboy thing, it kind of gets us to the ending. One of the things that I was thinking about when I was watching it was that McClane invokes the cowboy kind of imagery with like Marshall Dillon and like Roy Rogers and things like that. And Hans always gets it wrong, and he always has to correct him, right? Even in the last scene, right? He says this person doesn't do this person. He says no, that's yeah. He says Grace Kelly doesn't walk away with I forget who it is, right? But basically, he gets him wrong, and he has to correct him.
Yeah, it's no.
Gary Cooper, right? See,
Yeah,
exactly shows
instead
you
of
how much we know this shit.
Clark Gable. I don't
Yeah,
remember, but
he
yeah.
said he gets it wrong, and I think that implants it shows because one of the things that they do constantly in the film as like the back and forth between McClane and Gruber is that Gruber is definitely more intellectually polished. He has more like finesse and pizzazz in many ways, right? But McClane has a stronger kind of knowledge of like self to a certain degree, and he has a street innate smartness. But then also, I think the American thing is like you think you know America, but McClane is like America, like America's soul. So basically, I always read this film that like if McClane wasn't there, Hans would have won. Easy. Like no one would have known shit, right? It'd have been but since you get the McClane, who was like this unique part of like America's soul, right? He's the one thing that a Gruber can't take. You know, he's the one thing that will thwart all of the what he says classical European education, the real slick, the high funding. That's one of the things that they're able to they made a point out that they have a lot of money, that they're well financed. He does point that out so that like McClane can beat all that because when you're in American soil, if you have the real Americana, he can defeat it all just by his will, of everything. So they use that to constantly do it, and then because that final sequence, which like I will admit would just come from the book where he shoots him with the tape gun in the back. It actually is from the book. Um, it's one of the things that they kept. It's slick, right? It's slick, and then yeah, you say it's like the final like showdown, right? He comes down. Oh well, they do the draw, right? And he able to take out two guys, and he blows on the gun and goes, "Happy trails, Hans," right? Which I find it hilarious that like he just shot someone where his wife is right there, and he has all the time in the world to act like he's a cool motherfucker while his wife is right next to his guy who killed him. It's just so perverse.
Yeah, the only thing I add is like we didn't really talk about this too much, I don't think, is just you referenced it. But just to go back to the like by the book, etc. Like so Hans has studied the manuals, right? And like there is sort of a critique here partly of like why did these places sort of publish or make known how they all operate?
Mm-hmm.
But then and who knows whether it's published or not, right? But he's clearly read the books and how they're going to move in this conflict against them, which is part of what he has to know that they'll cut out the power because they can't get the last piece of the safe, whatever to call it, like the last, I don't know, they can't unlock the safe ultimately without the power being taken out, basically. And they take out the power within the building, but they need it to be cut from the grid, basically. But and so this then opens up, of course, for John McClane, right? Because he doesn't operate by the book, right? He's the one who can actually solve the problem with his violence that doesn't go by the book, right? And obviously, in that, again, it's like a very elementary copaganda technique on it, honestly, of just sort of this notion of you know, he is the thin blue line, right? Like he is the one that's like he's gonna do whatever you can to save literal hell from coming out from under the earth, right? To, you know, take apart Western civilization. Um, which is nuts, right? Because also he's the one who's dropping satchels of C4 down, you know, an elevator and shooting everybody, and you know, but that's all justified. It's all necessary, you know. So yeah.
So, like, one of the final things that I find really interesting is, so when people remember, he shoots Hans. Hans stumbles back towards the window, and the thing that keeps Hans from dropping is he's not only holding on to Holly, he's holding on to Holly's Rolex. And remember that the Rolex was given to Holly by Ellis and the corporate people, right? And I'm sorry, this is total cinematic imagery shit, right? Like, you see then him hanging on the gun, he's like doing in the nice, you know, slow motion shot, and they take off the Rolex, right? And that's what makes Hans drops to his death. And then you have the line, God, I hope it's not a hostage, you know? Like, and they always like throw in these like little comedy lines when you're to kind of like soften off the violent death. It's really perverse. But this is, to me, where I kind of go back to the beginning. You get the nasty patriarchal kind of read to the film, right? It's that John goes through a change, right? Through it, because he has that monologue where he says, you know, tell her I'm sorry if I die, right? And that I should have been more understanding, so forth and so on. But Holly also has a change because she like relinquishes what is probably negative of her new kind of business life, right? And is represented through the Rolex, right? It's like the Rolex was like basically like a wall. Because what you see happen in the sequence after he dies, then they hug and they kiss, and you get like the kind of, you know, reconciliation of the two of them. But when you go outside and when she introduces herself, he goes, John says Holly no, she goes Holly McClane. She takes the name back. And what's interesting about the film is that it's basically saying through this like excessive violence ritual where he gets to save his wife, right? And kind of prove his manhood, he gets his wife back. And it adds to the what we are talking about this kind of American violence. It's like a baptism, right? It's like a baptism or a washing or an exorcism is maybe too of like the demons that you have. So kind of vibe. But John doesn't also just have a change. It's like Holly has a change. And in the film, they basically make it like, because there's two other lines in the film that I think are really significant with Holly. Is that, no, really one, when she sees, when after Carl is unable to kill John, um with like the glass part, he smashes the bar cart, and she says, you know, he's still alive. She goes, what do you mean? Only John can make someone this angry. And she smiles. And it's like her accepting that John's faults are also his virtues. And this is a really nasty thing they do in American movies constantly. It's like, it's not that like someone has to change. It's like they need to actually keep this shitty part of them because it's gonna be needed when the foreign terrorists come in to take over Nakatomi Plaza. That's when you need, you know, his hyper masculinity, his, you know, brute force, his breaking the rules, his not listening to people, right? You know, the fact that he doesn't listen to me, well, we're gonna need that when, you know, hell comes.
Yeah. No,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, the only thing left, right, is
His
the
pal.
Carl Winslow redemption scene. his last act before he has to relocate to Chicago
I
and argue
mean,
with Steve Urkel.
I can't. One thing I will say, even as a kid, I've always struggled with Carl coming back out when we see him hanging from his neck for like there's like 3 shots of it. I'm like,
Yeah,
okay.
that is weird.
Yeah, there's like a shot when all of them are coming back down, and like the assumption he's been there for like at least 5 or 6 minutes. And I'm like, how's homie alive? I don't get it. Like, but I guess superhuman Euro terrorists, But yeah, like you see, Carl come out and he's right, and he's about to shoot McClane, and then you just get, I mean, the way the gun is, I mean, it's like the biggest handgun I've ever seen in a movie. It's like, and like the way it sounds like pa pa, right? Like it really the way it shoots him, and you see the scrolling shot and the music. So this is the other thing that's always bothered me, and I gotta confirm today. I was like, that sounds like the song from Aliens, and it is. It's an unused James Horner version of one of the score pieces of Aliens. It is. It's the exact same thing, but I know James Horner didn't do the music for this, so I always find it weird. They must have just bought it from him. But like, he gets this like glorious like thing come down, and like you see him like arrive, right, and like he's now, and it's like to the point you made earlier, Jay. It's really disgusting because basically it's like when you do sequences like that, one of the implicit things is that for him to kind of like hit a new level of humanity, the bad thing he did was necessary. So basically killing the kid was also necessary in like his life trajectory. And it's just fucked up, man. Right. And then also the other part that I find hilarious is like he's now supercharged. So when Argyle crashes through, he's about ready to shoot him.
No, wait, he's with me. Yeah.
But it's so gross. It's so gross. Like I was watching it, so I was like, oh man, this is, and I felt it way for a while now, but I was like, this is so gross.
And it's not necessary either to the movie. I mean, it's only like, because if the movie's over, right? Like it's like a false ending, essentially. Like you think things are just gonna be like, okay, and then out comes Carl from the dead. Like very much like yeah, like horror movies, right? Where, you have to actually see the person you know, like you never assume somebody's actually dead, right? In a horror movie, they could always come back. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I do think that one of the thing about the super villain, stuff in the Germans. I mean, that is where the Nazi shit always comes back to a little bit, of like this idea that like, they who knows what kind of drugs that they've taken to make themselves into super soldiers, or whatever. And I mean, it's obviously like a lot of that is just displacement too of like
Yeah.
shit America actually does, of like, oh, the Nazis, they're the ones who would do stuff like this. And that's always, we've talked about this before, but it's always kind of there when they pull in these German terrorists and German figures in the 80s, right? Is it's like still this like, we haven't quite gotten over, like we haven't gotten over Vietnam yet, but at least we can harken back to World War II, and we have this one group of white people who are not us that we can point to that are like, this is where you get the really evil white people is
Yeah.
from
Yeah.
Germany.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, like, and there's also a sense with Carl compared to Hans that like Carl still, he probably doesn't have those political beliefs, but he has a certain like ideological code, right? Because he's willing when his brother gets killed, he's like, nah, all bets off, right? Rather like Hans is like, no, stick. He says it literally, stick to the plan, right? Right. And so Carl is like this, he is that super soldier, primitive, and like the Nazi is like this like primitive. There are, because there's also that shot of him where he's like walking with like the gun. on the roof. I mean, it's so like I'm like, y'all are weird. Like these like visions you have of people that you make. And like I just imagine these guys writing these screenplays and just going, oh, that'd be cool. I'm like walk across the roof like he's like a dancer, right? I want you to be like Barishnikov or someone, like I can hear like the directorial lines, right? And it's a way kind of what you said, like they also think of them as like these like weird, like other humans, right? Like, I mean, that's a lot how the comic books look at. If you read comic book stuff on like Nazis, they love the occult Nazi stuff too. Like they love that stuff like Red Skull, right? That like, they were all really looking. I mean, which is something the Indiana Jones stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then there's a whole thing too, which is done very much in Marvel of like they actually meld the Soviet Union and the Nazis together in the form of Hydra, right? So there's both,
Yeah.
it becomes this like communist fascist alliance
Right.
or whatever,
Which is crazy. I mean, when we get to Rambo 2, I also think that's a thing, like because he's supposed to be Russian, but he always gives off more fascist, the guy, right? And he's played by a Brit. Played by fucking a Brit.
The only other note that I had too is this another propaganda thing too is just that at the end of the day, cops are just trying to get home to their families, like just trying to get home to their wives, right? Like they're just trying to get there for Christmas, right? Like that's, then, and again, like this is why, among many other reasons, that this is absolutely a Christmas movie, right? Is like
Yeah.
it's sort of like got to get home for Christmas, that's like at the end of the day. So,
Right. Like, yeah, like
yeah.
how is it any different than planes, trains, and automobiles in that kind of way, right? Like they'll credit that as a holiday movie, right? Like you're trying to get home, right? It's the thwarted journey movie. It's totally fucking it is, what did Paul Verhoeven say about RoboCop is American Jesus? The Die Hard is American Christmas.
Right. I mean, there's an argument to be made that it is like the most American Christmas movie,
I think
right?
so. I'm willing to put my money on that. My hat is placed that this is the most American Christmas movie there is. It is the movie of American Christmas.
All right, let's see. Chat, you've been great today. This is definitely the same movie as Planes, Trains, and Automobiles. Um, yeah, this was the comment I brought up earlier about, so Paul was the one who brought this up about it being a vertical action movie contained in one building. Even as a kid,
100%.
the concept just seemed wholly unique. Yeah. Um,
And
I don't know
when
if it's totally unique, but it's the first movie I can think of like that,
well, there was Towering Inferno, which is
Oh, yeah.
inspired the book that this came from, but it's not. It's different in that kind of way. But no, it is wholly unique in how this is executed, right? And it's been trying to be copied 8,000 times.
Um, they they believe in nothing.
They believe in nothing. Exactly. I read it in Forbes. It's so
Only
funny.
money.
Only money.
Um, yeah, so Yippee Ki was from Roy Rogers, which also like that's why he has them call him Roy over the radio too, right? Is and he had
Yeah.
said he liked Roy Rogers with the
The
um
settler origin is a good point. Yeah.
sparkly outfit. Um, yeah, and this is always the thing that I like about heist movies is like even though they are not, again, there's no super political thing about it,
Hmm.
right? But just the notion that, you know, like banks and all this other shit, like that these capitalist institutions thrive off of stealing money from everyday people. And so
Hmm.
any movie where you have everyday people trying to get money back from them, I'm
Yeah.
rooting for them.
Well, I'll give you a good heist movie that I root for is The Red Circle by Melville. Jean-Pierre Melville, French film. Really good movie. That's a really good movie. Heist film.
I'll have to check it out.
Yeah, it's a classic.
Colin, this was so shout out to Colin. He's the one I got. The Carl Winslow was a guilty LA cop who changed their name and moved to Chicago.
It's so good.
um, I wanted to bring this up. This good good catch. So this Clarence Gilliard Jr.
Yep.
is the name
Mm-hmm.
of the actor, and yeah, he's in Top Gun. He was in 196 episodes of Walker, Texas Ranger.
Yeah, he's
Holy
a
shit.
big character in it. I
Um,
remember. I mean, I didn't watch it, but I remember like trying looking him up and being like, "Oh shit, that's
and
what became
then
his career."
and then 84 episodes of Matlock, the old one.
Ah, my grandma
With
must have watched him.
he was Conrad McMaster's, yeah, the Andy Griffith one, which I used to watch as a kid sometimes.
That's my grandma. One of my
Um,
grandma's favorite shows.
yeah, it was definitely I watched it with my grandmother or my dad or whatever, but yeah. Um, Cop Carl went on to be harassed by Steve Urkel and be catty with police who almost liquidated his son Eddie Winslow. Yeah. Um, yeah, the logical suspension of disbelief is why I don't make movies. I hate every single time those things will bother me.
But they don't have to like some of it is just bad writing. It's just
Totally.
bad writing.
It's when it becomes like, so they're using all these instances, like not being able to hear the gunfire or not having the shoes, like it's an obvious plot device, right? It's like something that they intentionally do so that you will have something, so the movie will play out in a certain way. And I just don't want it to be so sloppy is my
Right.
main thing. Like I would like to be, I don't know. Somebody said the point that it was he knew that they were coming and they were coming quick, so he didn't go to get his shoes. And like maybe I go back and watch the scene. Maybe I miss a little bit of that. But I just think it would have been nice for me. I would have liked something of like you see the shoes sitting on, a bench in another office or something where he's like, oh fuck, I can't get to them, all right. Let's see, what else do we have? We only have a couple more. Yeah, I know M2 may already answered this question, but I just wanted to raise this up because if anybody can find the debate that happened, off the top of my head, I can't remember the name of the program. Maybe somebody in the chat will. But it was a PBS like
Yeah.
debate show basically, and
I've never looked
it would
for
be
it.
it has to exist like in some archive somewhere, but I don't think it's on the internet anywhere. I think that Chinimacho is right about that because we had a whole bunch of people looking for it when we um did the study group on that book, and but I have to believe that somewhere in the archives
Hmm.
it's there. um Davi is like Timu Ray Liotta. I loved this one. Shout out to that Family Matters theme song.
Yeah. Now it's in my head. No, so I'm going to invoke Run DMC's Christmas song to get that back in my head. As our this is Christmas music, right? That Argyle says to him at the very beginning. Shout out to Argyle.
Good comment here by Samantha Youssef. The hypersexualized made a big push to associate that level of violence as being sexy as well, and I think that's a really good point. Like all of these people, were seen as like sex symbols. Um, I can't, thinking of Arnold Schwarzenegger as a sex symbol is just weird to me, but I
Well,
imagine
Bruce
that there
Willis,
were
I mean,
people who did it
Bruce Willis definitely was. And then remember,
for
because
sure.
then
Stallone too.
within a year of that, he also marries Demi Moore.
Yeah.
So he becomes like a really big icon of that kind of like male, sexual accomplishment. And so like connecting it to violence, because that's to be the way that he would, be able to most exude it, right? Like, and like I said, like in the movie, like there's like all these little things where you see the possibility of like his male, sexuality, right? like that, he sees like the naked woman, he goes, girls, right? There's like all these little quasi moments of his sexuality like exuded, right? And that women recognize it too. The fact that you have like a couple of key scenes where the women look at him like they give him the look. And it's funny because it happens in Die Hard 2 also. There's even longer sequence where he has like a long flirt with one of the airport clerks, and she basically does what she wants because she thinks he's hot, right? Even though he's in that film, he's in a happy marriage. By that time, him and Holly are together in Die Hard 2. They're like in a happy marriage, and it's like totally. So there's that other kind of like we talk about with what's his name, Chevy Chase in the National Lampoon's movies, that he's allowed to kind of have this kind of extramarital, energy at the very least with like other women, while that can't happen the other way
Yeah, that's
around.
it. Yeah, and I think that's an interesting thing too. I mean, Chevy Chase obviously like that's a different genre, but I feel like there's a special license given to that within cop films in
Mm,
particular, and cop TV shows too, of and it's always sort of dealt with in this way of like, oh well, their work is so traumatic, right? That they you got to let them blow off some steam and like, hang out with, sex workers and, all this kind of stuff. And but it's like deep and it runs through a lot of films. And I think about that in terms of also like the type, because these movies are marketed to young men, right? And there is a role within the society of, bringing more people into the military, bringing more people
yeah,
into cops. Like there is a recruitment element to all of this stuff. It's why, the Department of Defense invests in these kind of films and other, there's a lot of involvement of police within Hollywood and all of that too. And it's just interesting because it's like on one level, it's we've talked about these things where, or you've talked about this idea where sometimes within films, it's like, well, is it imitating life or is it producing certain outcomes, right?
hmm,
And like, and where do you draw that line? And obviously, there's just a relationship between these things too, right?
yeah,
So it's like on one end, you could say, well, this is based on a reality that a lot of cops are, you know, they are more predisposed to domestic violence. They are more predisposed to being bad partners. Like all of those things actually do have empirical bases for them. But then you create movies that really kind of like justify or, present the heroes in this kind of fashion. And I mean, Die Hard's not the worst, in that
no,
line of film, but it comes up in a lot of movies that center around cops as lead characters.
yeah. There's this line in this Al Pacino movie called Sea of Love. I don't even remember this movie. He plays like a cop, and he's like, it's like we maybe should do that. That's gonna be a fun movie to do. It's like one of these like New York, who's the killer? Actually, we should do that movie because
What
actually
movie is it?
Sea of Love with him and Ellen Barkin.
Okay.
It's like, he's a cop, and like, there's like a killer of like men. Oh, actually, we should definitely do this movie. And they think it's a woman, right? And it might be the woman that he's sleeping with, Ellen Barkin. But he has a line in the film where he says, "In this town, I'm everybody's daddy," and he says it like admonishing her, not understanding him being a cop. And there's this way that like it's presented for us to think about like cops as the basically like the fathers of all of us, and in this idea that father gets to basically do extra things because life has so much pressure, right? The existence, so if you're like the daddy of New York City, right, and he does it in the classic Al Pacino, "In this town, I'm everybody's daddy." It's like really admonishing this woman for like not understanding his pressures and the fact that if he does something that's a bit fucked up, oh, because in the context that he does it, he basically like embarrasses her at her job, right? And he has to let her know, "I'm everybody's daddy. I gotta do shit that's fucked up every now and then, and you gotta accept it, right? I gotta go the extra mile a little bit." And it is that mentality, and it's pretty shit.
Yeah, that's I feel like I probably have to have seen it because I've seen, but
Oh,
I don't really remember it off the.
oh man, you should see. We should definitely do it. It's a classic
We
in
have
that
to do
kind
it.
of
No,
Pacino,
I
yeah.
I
And it
want to
goes
do it.
into
I mean, we yeah.
that panic, It goes into that like it tries to flip the Night Stalker panic, but put it on men.
Mhm.
It's weird,
Interesting.
and I haven't seen it in a while. Yeah, to be interested to do
Yeah,
that.
I mean, these kind of themes that come up in like Heat, they come up in Den of Thieves. Like it's yeah, it's a lot of movies that have this shit.
Yeah,
So this is the Safia Bukhari debate. If it's yeah, America's
check
War
this
on
out.
Drugs on PBS 98. Um,
I
is the
mean,
name of the show,
my
moderated by Tavis
immediate
Smiley.
guess, my immediate guess is Texas A&M has it, and
Yeah.
Cruise in them have basically made it that they can't release it. That's my immediate guess.
Somebody needs to sneak in there with a camera phone and just record clips and upload it anonymously to YouTube. But
Call
I
Theo,
did, I
man.
didn't.
We get Theo. Theo didn't die in the movie. He didn't die. Theo's not dead. He just got punched by Argyle. Call Theo.
um, I was trying to think if we've had. This is one of the first hip hop songs we've seen in a movie that we've done so far. Run DMC's "Christmas in Hollis," which is early on in the film. It can't be the only one we've had, but
That I can think of. Probably, maybe.
yeah. I mean, it's also part of it is that like that was the thing about rap music is it wasn't really, you know, it wasn't really ready for Hollywood for several years, except for well, we will get to some early. We'll do, we got to do Wild Style at some point, some of the
Yeah,
early stuff, but those
and
are
it's being
like
yeah.
those are niche films. It's not like big Hollywood films.
Yeah, and it's being invoked here as a kind of a joke, like to kind of like show
Hmm.
Argyle to be, oh, what the fuck has John gotten himself into? He
Totally.
got a fast talking, slick young black man riding a limo who plays rap music.
And he's the one from New York, and he's like, "What is this shit?" And the LA black man is the one playing it. Yeah.
This is Christmas music. Shout out to Argyle though. Argyle is funny, man. And we have to do Action Jackson. Because then I'm telling you, watch Lethal Weapon, Action Jackson, and Die Hard like in like the same week or say a couple of weeks, and you'll see the same people. Like the
We need
newscaster,
a
she's in all three. Because she's the whatchamacallit. I always forget her. She's the mom in Goonies too. Like like super character actress. You know,
I'm gonna start an online petition to get Orasami Burton to come on and do Action Jackson with us because
bruh.
he said that he wanted to, but then he sometimes we have to coax Ori to get on the show. But
How do you
that
like
would be
your
good.
ribs? Well, look. If Ori, I want Ori to do it with us, and if we do it, that we have to clip because them scenes. There are so many scenes in that movie. Oh man, how do you like your ribs? And then he just eviscerates dude with the flamethrower. Two Goonies references, Stevie. Yeah, man, I'm sorry, dude. Goonies is a major part of my childhood, which we have to do that as well.
We're gonna do Goonies. Yeah. So before we go, let me just point to the upcoming. So first of all, I've put a bunch of stuff on the upcoming video stuff on Millennials. So folks check the schedule and turn you can individually clip to be notified on all of them. But I'll first just go through Imperial 80s upcoming. So we've sorted this out. So next week we're going to do Scrooged, and then we weren't initially going to do one on the 22nd, but Lara Shihai very much wanted to do Christmas Story, which is great because that's a
That's
perfect
wild.
additional perspective to have on Christmas Story. So we will do a Christmas Story on December 22nd, which will probably be, I think, the only thing that I will do that week for the show. So anyways, look forward to both of those. So next week, Scrooge, and then on the 22nd, Christmas Story. There's a few other things I have to get up on the conversation, having a conversation about the hunger strikes in the UK with Calla Walsh tomorrow, but also that's not on the schedule yet. Tomorrow on the schedule, we have a conversation on the so-called Malaya emergency with Fadia Nadwa Fikri, which I'm really looking forward to. She wrote this piece on Vox Umma, and for folks who don't know, like this is a very like the development of counterinsurgency doctrine almost always points to the Malaya emergency as like one of its key origin points. So that's going to be really good. And then obviously we'll be connecting it into like current counterinsurgency tactics with Palestine and everything else too. Dwayne Monroe is going to be here on Wednesday to talk about why the term enshittification is actually not a very good concept, and so I'm looking forward to hearing him talk about that. And I'm sure we'll talk about some other stuff too. And then, yeah, Alex Avina is gonna be back on also later that day. I'm too busy this week.
Oh,
To do imperialism, genocide, and sports washing and peace. So we'll talk about FIFA giving Trump the peace prize and all the other madness. And then the only other thing that I didn't mention that's on the calendar is Gemma DeCristo is going to come on to talk about her book, which just came out a couple months ago, actually, at this point, but The Aesthetic Character of Blackness, which is going to be a really interesting discussion because she really frames that all of this stuff about, people talking about Black art, serving as this kind of like, there's been a discussion particularly, which she talks about in the preface of the book, of like amid the George Floyd uprising and stuff, all the ways that like Black art was commissioned or used to like change the scenery of the space, right?
mhm.
Um, but her analysis, which is really fascinating, is really a much longer argument that this is not actually something new, and that we have to actually go to the origins with like Frederick Douglass, writing down like spirituals and stuff like that, to like the very kind of introduction of Black art, from moving it from the slave community, right? Or
Mhm.
the enslaved population nation into spaces of like white art and white consumption, and to really understand the role of that Black art serves within US society, which so I just look forward to talking to her about her work around that. I think it's going to be really interesting. But
That's
yeah, the
dope.
book is interesting. Yeah.
That's dope.
All right, man. Anything
All
else
right,
you
y'all.
want to plug? You got
Yeah, I mean, we're still going strong. I have a couple. I put out a couple. Jared Ball and I recently did something from Within Our Gates that you should check out about hip hop. I have a good interview with Leanne Fulan from Socialist Program and the People's Forum talking about the stuff going on over there. I have a new one coming out this week with my homie Jason Smith. We're talking about the film Top of the Heap, which people have not seen. Is one of the best unseen films. You can see it on Tubi from the 70s. Also, but it's about a black cop, but it's the black cop in the different kind of way. It's really, really good. Made by Christopher St. John. It's a really great film. And then I have some other stuff coming up pretty soon. Doing some recording, some good stuff coming in. So yeah. That's what we got. But looking forward to the next couple of weeks. I honestly, you know what's funny, Steven? I just haven't seen it in a long time. So like I couldn't really we watched it in my house growing up. I just don't remember it. But it
Yeah,
was
I
people
don't know that
forget
I did.
it was a social phenomenon though. Like it was a big deal. People were pissed that it got canceled because Bruce Willis' career. And then there was a lot of stuff. I mean, then it like Sybil Shepherd like lost her career again after that. It was supposed to be her like comeback, and then like because of the way it gets talked about, women get talked about in Hollywood. It's just like the double. the double end career.
All right. Well, thank you again, Mtume. This was good.
Yeah, for sure.
And then next week we will hit Scrooge. And then on December 22nd, if the Manhattan Institute hasn't shuttered its offices for the holiday season, then I'm sure they'll be very disappointed in our content.
Yeah. Oh yeah, they're gonna be. Ooh! Okay, we'll have to be extra spicy. Okay, I'll get the cayenne out.
All right, man. Have a good one. Peace, y'all.